Holly rushed around the room, finishing up the cleaning. She wiped dust off the vase, arranged the sofa cushions for a better look. The last time she had put in this much effort was years ago, before her mother-in-law's visit. Hannah, her mother-in-law, was a toxic and perpetually dissatisfied woman, impossible to please. Even hiring 50 maids wouldn't guarantee success in cleaning up to her standards. But now, Holly was expecting her sister's visit, and she wanted everything to look nice. They hadn't seen each other in 5 years. As Holly moved the cushions one last time and headed to put the kettle on, right on cue, the doorbell rang. Coming, she called out, rushing to the hallway. Children's fists were knocking on the door. Holly heard Erin scolding her child, and she smiled. She recognized her sister. The door swung open, and Erin embraced her. "Hey, here we are." Her son also hugged his aunt, and they all entered the apartment together. "Let me take a good look at you." Erin pushed Holly back a bit and gazed at her with a radiant look. "Same freckles, and that same cute nose. You haven't changed at all." "Oh, come on." Holly blushed. "You're talking like you haven't seen me in ages. We just chatted on video yesterday." I compared. "It's a whole different thing," Erin replied, looking around. "And your apartment is entirely different. And I'm not talking about the wallpaper." "What? Did you clean for a day straight?" "We always keep it this way," Holly replied, unconvincingly. It sounded so unconvincing that Erin, naturally, didn't believe her. "Oh, sure," she said. "I remember how you loved to mess up when we shared a room. Things scattered everywhere, papers. I was the one doing all the cleaning. You can't fool me." Okay, you caught me." Holly sighed. "I did spend 2 days cleaning. Are you satisfied now? And you're not fooling me, are you?" Erin squinted. "You know, I can sense lies. We grew up together, after all." Holly looked at her sister in surprise. "Erin, I don't get it. First, you didn't believe I clean here every day. Now you are still not happy. What are you hinting at?" Erin didn't have a chance to answer. Her little son, Billy, clattered some cups in the kitchen, and the sisters hurried there. "Looks like we're starting the cleaning over," Erin said. "You went through all this trouble for nothing." "Sorry, Mom," the boy apologized. "Sorry, Aunt Holly." The cup was on the edge of the table. It fell by itself. "Yeah, jumped off the table." Erin smirked. "Okay, sister, bring me a broom. I'll pick up the shards." While they cleaned up, while they brewed tea, Holly completely forgot about the strange conversation. She only remembered it when Billy was watching cartoons. That's when Erin returned to the previous topic. "Tell me, does Todd mistreat you?" she asked Holly. "Does he find fault with everything? Demands perfection like his late mother? Maybe he's just as difficult." "Why would you think that?" Holly wondered. "Todd does grumble sometimes, but who doesn't? And you talk as if our house is a mess. It's a bit hurtful, actually." Erin covered her hand with hers. "Don't be mad at me," she said. "When we talked on video, you sometimes look sad." I didn't dare ask. Saved the conversation for our meeting. And now that we've met, why not talk? Everything's fine with us." Holly shrugged, avoiding eye contact. Her sister's question stirred up an old wound. In reality, she hadn't considered everything fine in their family for a long time. Holly and Todd didn't fight, but they also hadn't had heartfelt conversations in ages. Todd held a high position at work and came home very late. He was so tired that he only had energy to have dinner and sit in front of the TV. Holly tried not to bother him. Romance had disappeared from their lives entirely. She only saw flowers in flower beds and jewelry in store displays. If Todd gave her anything, it was practical items like a steamer or a set of pots. They hadn't had a date in years. The last time they went to a cafe was probably for their 5th wedding anniversary. Moonlit walks were out of the question. Work was Todd's top priority. It was a kind of closed loop. Everything seemed fine, but they lived like neighbors. Holly felt embarrassed to talk about it with her sister. Erin had a happy family, a caring husband, a smart son who studied foreign languages and played soccer from the age of 3. Holly didn't want to appear as the failure next to her sister. The sisters chatted a bit more, reminiscing about the past. They avoided discussing Holly's family life. It was too complicated a subject. It was easier to talk about their youth when everything was simple and clear. When the clock hands approached 7 in the evening, Erin called her son. "Billy, it's time to get ready," she said. "Go put on your jacket." The boy placed his phone on the table and rushed to the hallway. Holly looked at her sister with surprise. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "Where to?" "To a hotel." "Where else?" Erin replied. "We need somewhere to stay overnight with Billy." "Why don't you stay with us?" Holly said. "I've already prepared a room for you, the one we wanted to turn into a nursery. I put fresh sheets. Everything is tidy." "Sorry, but I already rented an apartment, made all the arrangements, paid in advance. It's too late to cancel anything." "But why?" Holly was astonished. "I warned you in advance. Told you 100 times that I'd be happy to have you here." Erin sighed heavily. "Holly, we would love to stay, but honestly, I doubt that your husband and I would get along. You know, I've never liked your Todd." "Well, I know," Holly replied, "though I don't understand why." "You're naive, Holly." Her sister shook her head. "You see everything in rose-colored glasses. Blind to deception. You've been talking in riddles all day." Holly was surprised. "What deception are you talking about? What's going on?" "I hope there's none," Erin sadly replied. "But you still need to take a closer look at your husband. I have a feeling he's not the angel he pretends to be." Holly's sister and her nephew left, and she went back to the kitchen to set the table for her husband's arrival. Todd wasn't too picky about how she managed the household, but he didn't like waiting for dinner. Over the years of marriage, Holly had learned Todd's habits well and tried not to irritate him. The soup was almost boiling when the lock clicked at the front door. Holly hurried to the hallway. "Todd, you are later than usual today. You can't spend your whole life at work." She noticed that her husband wasn't alone and froze in place. With surprise, Holly watched as a tall, dark-haired girl, quite attractive, entered the hallway after Todd. She was taller than Todd. "Hello," Holly said uncertainly. "And who are you?" The girl smirked but didn't say anything. Todd sighed and looked at his wife. "Here, meet her. This is Rebecca." "Rebecca?" Holly asked again. "Is she your new co-worker? I remember you mentioned hiring new people in the department." The brunette beauty smiled even wider, as if Holly's words amused her. "She's not just our new co-worker," Todd said. "Rebecca is my future wife." "Wife? And what does that make me?" Holly exclaimed. Warnings from Erin flashed in her mind. As always, her sister turned out to be absolutely right. She didn't know her husband at all. Although, on the other hand, what was happening now was completely fantastical. Could Holly have imagined something like this? The brunette cast a disdainful look at her. "I, of course, apologize," she said loudly. "But judging by your appearance, you're just a regular cook." Holly indignantly asked her husband. "Todd, are you just going to stay silent? Do you think this kind of insult is okay? Isn't she right?" Her husband asked. "Look at yourself. You don't look like a woman at all. More like a multifunctional blender or a robot vacuum. The cleaning lady in our office is even more attractive." His words struck her like a blow. Todd hadn't complimented her in a long time, but he had never stooped to insults. "And what if I refuse a divorce?" Holly asked. "If I demand a division of property, then what?" In reality, all of these were empty threats. Holly knew well that she wouldn't demand anything from her husband. She didn't need any money. The only thing she needed was Todd's love. Her husband listened to her words coldly and smirked. "Division of property? Are you serious? There's nothing of yours in this apartment. Everything was bought with my money. Even the clothes you're wearing now. I bought them." What can you claim? Get a grip. Rebecca laughed again. Her laughter echoed in Holly's ears for a long time. She couldn't believe that Todd spoke to her in such a tone. After all, in the beginning, when they just started dating, their future looked so cloudless. By the standards of her peers, Holly got married quite late. By that time, she was already 30. Her classmates had already given birth, and some even divorced. She devoted all her time to her boring job at a small company and painting. Since childhood, Holly had been drawn to painting, but it never went beyond a hobby. Painting seemed too unserious to dedicate her life to, especially when her mother, Madison, endlessly lectured her on how to live. Go to law school, her mother would say. Knowing the laws will always come in handy, and you can find some kind of job in our town. At least you won't go hungry, just like she had advised her older daughter. But she didn't listen. Always correct and quiet, Taryn, for the first time in her life, showed defiance and pursued her own path, becoming a geologist. No one expected such a choice from the modest girl. And what will you do after college, may I ask? Madison would inquire. Go on an expedition? Live in a tent and sift through dirty rocks? Or will you go to the mines? Maybe. Erin said, I've always done what you wanted, Mom. Allow me to do things my way at least once. Please, don't argue with me. It was foolish to hope that these pleas would have an effect on her mother. She continued to grumble, wishing her daughter not to be accepted into university. And when Erin did enroll, Madison cried for a long time. Similarly, she reacted to the choices Erin made in her personal life. Sam, a fellow student of the girl, proposed to her before graduation. When Erin's mother found out, she went into hysterics. Marriage to this loser, she shouted. Erin, isn't it enough that you chose a stupid profession? Do you want to ruin your life completely by getting involved with some commoner? Maybe he's a commoner, Mom, but he's a good person. Erin calmly replied, At least I'm 100% sure he won't treat me the way our father treated you. Remind me how you cried at night after his scandals. This phrase was a forbidden move, a real low blow. Their father left the family when Holly was 7 years old and never saw his daughters again. His name became a taboo in the family. They didn't even mention his existence. And now Erin had broken the eternal rule. Go marry whoever you want, her mother coldly said. But don't come crying to me. When this Sam can't protect you from thugs or doesn't turn enough to support the family, remember that I warned you. This marriage won't lead to anything good. I'll remember that, Mom. Erin nodded. But your advice won't be useful to me. Sam and I are like two halves of a whole. You understand? And everything will be fine in our family life. The young couple got married and moved up north. Initially, Erin's mother was angry with her. During phone calls, she spoke dryly, but then she began to miss her. After their conversations, she would cry, blaming Sam for everything. He took Erin away from me, she complained to her younger daughter. Erin fell under this guy's influence and left me. If not for him, everything could have been different. We would live in the same city, all together. And now, all of Madison's attention was focused on Holly. She surrounded her daughter with care like she had never seen in her life. Even more so, she began to monitor every step Holly took, calling her if she was delayed by even half an hour. She inquired about her friends. Perhaps the mother wanted what was best, trying to protect Holly from undesirable connections. But the fact remained. Years passed, and the girl remained alone. Certainly, men tried to court her both in college and at work, but nothing worked out. It's hard to date someone who can't break free from home and constantly responds to her mother's text messages, letting her know where she went. Holly herself didn't understand the reason for her failures. She philosophically thought that it was her fate to remain alone, and the conversations with her mother had done their job. By the age of 30, Holly firmly believed that men were not worthy of her. There were guys around, but they were all wrong. either too frivolous or too dull. That's how she would continue to live if not for the black streak that began in Holly's family. It all started when Madison broke her arm, very foolishly and unexpectedly slipped on a wet porch. And as if that misfortune wasn't enough, their grandmother, on top of everything, started having heart problems. Lauren had been living in the village since birth. She only went to the city for education in her youth. She got married there, raised a daughter. Madison grew up, moved to the city, and after her divorce, began to call her mother to live with her. She needed help with the kids, and she worried about their old woman. But Lauren refused to leave the village. "I grew up here, and here I will die," Lauren replied. "What do I have to do in your city? It's nothing but heat and dust. No, my place is here, in the village." Madison resigned herself to seeing her mother only on weekends and during vacations. She didn't object when Lauren asked for help, but now the situation was simply hopeless. Her own arm was in a cast. Lauren suffered from the heat and didn't leave the house. She was distressed about her household, and it couldn't improve the condition of the elderly woman. Holly came to the rescue. "Let me go to Grandma," she suggested to her mother over breakfast. "I'm on vacation anyway. I'll help Grandma, and I'll take a break from the city." Even with her broken arm, Madison continued to go to work, to the accounting office. Therefore, the daughter's idea aroused great interest in her. Although, for appearances, the woman tried to argue, "What kind of break is there, Holly?" She sighed. "Watering flowers, taking care of the lawn, and that's all the entertainment. You won't help Grandma, and you won't rest. It's better to hire some workers." "What workers, Mom? Are you kidding?" Holly laughed. "We just don't have money for that. I'll handle everything just fine." The girl packed a small bag and set off on her journey the next morning. Youth, optimism, and self-belief were on her side. Holly had no doubt that everything would be fine. Lauren greeted her with open arms and even shed a tear. "Holly, my granddaughter, you didn't abandon me," she mumbled, embracing the girl, "and I didn't hope for it. I thought I'd just overgrow with weeds here." "Don't worry, Grandma, I'll do everything right," Holly reassured her. "You just relax and don't worry about anything." She was truly determined to bring the garden to perfection. She woke up at dawn and went to water the plants. She fought against pests as best as she could. Online advice came to her aid. The most challenging task was weeding. The tools stored in the shed turned out to be unsharpened. "How did you even work here, Grandma?" Holly muttered, sorting through the tools. "It's some kind of torture." Her struggle with the tools caught the attention of a neighbor, a young man about Holly's age. She had seen him before, somehow, through the fence. "What's up, neighbor? Can I help with something?" Holly glanced at him. The guy was handsome and, you could say, a bit cheeky. Light, almost dyed hair, a dandy haircut, and a bare torso, as if he deliberately undressed to show off his muscles. Her mother used to call such guys playboys and ladies' men. Holly took her mother's example. "Everything's fine," she mumbled. The tool got a little unsharpened. "I'll sharpen it." Holly expected their conversation to end there, but the stranger didn't leave her alone. "I can help," he offered. "It's a half-hour job for me. Nothing complicated. I can manage on my own," Holly said slowly and turned away. The guy stepped away from the fence but continued working nearby, keeping an eye on the neighbor. This annoyed Holly immensely. Settling in the shade, she opened her laptop and connected to the internet. There was plenty of information about gardening online and numerous videos on tool sharpening, but all of it seemed confusing to her. After spending an hour online and going through multiple websites, all she achieved was a headache. It seemed easier to hire workers than to figure everything out herself. Some guy passing by their plot stopped near the fence, saw Holly, and smirked stupidly. "Hey, how's it going? Maybe we should get to know each other," he asked. Holly rolled her eyes. All these phrases were so banal, and the guy himself wasn't the hero of her romance at all. His figure, haircut, silly gaze, she had an allergy to guys like him. Back in her college years, she realized that talking to such guys was simply pointless. Holly didn't dignify him with a look and turned away. The guy didn't get the hint and continued standing by the fence. "Hey, how are you?" he said louder. "Maybe you need help." Holly responded, "I'm fine. I don't need help. Goodbye." She got up, took her laptop, and went into the house. The guy shouted something after her, but she didn't listen. "What's wrong with you?" Lauren asked, seeing her distressed face. "Holly, do you have a headache?" "Nothing hurts, Grandma. I just realized that I'm not cut out for gardening. I imagined I could do it, but in reality, I don't know anything." "Well, then, drop this garden," her grandmother reassured her. "Don't strain yourself. Otherwise, your back will hurt in your youth. Like mine." "No way," Holly objected. "I'll handle everything." She couldn't believe that something as trivial as gardening would be a challenge for her. Since early childhood, having lost her father, Holly got used to handling everything on her own, and now she was determined to fight to the end. Lauren watched her all evening and suggested, "Wouldn't you go to the club?" "Why?" Holly was surprised. "What do I need there?" "Dancing," the old woman replied. "You need to distract yourself. Take a break. Do you think I only worked at your age?" "Not at all. I could dance and listen to music too." Holly barely managed not to burst into laughter in response to these words. "What dances, Grandma?" Holly asked. "I've been working in the garden all day. Tired. And it's so hot." "Then at least listen to music," her grandmother insisted. "Go have fun. Do me a favor, so I don't seem like a tyrant here." As much as Holly resisted, she had to go. Even the excuse of not having a dress didn't work. "I need something fancy for the club, and I have nothing like that. Just a sundress I wear to the store. But it's too plain." "That one, red?" Lauren asked. "It's not that simple. I couldn't even dream of such things at your age. Change into it and go. No more arguments." Initially, Holly just wanted to take a stroll down the street. She thought of going to the outskirts of the village to see the sunset. However, walking alone seemed eerie to her. Some houses were abandoned. A dog barked from a backyard. The club was glowing in the darkness, bright. With nothing else to do, Holly headed there like a moth to a flame. The party was in full swing. Young people circled around the hall to the sounds of songs from 5 years ago, and the light show was in full swing. Holly entered the hall and timidly froze against the wall. She hadn't been to parties since her college days, and now she felt completely lost. The idea of coming here initially seemed amusing, but in reality, it turned out to be complete foolishness. "Are you here for the first time?" a city girl. "Huh?" a girl asked Holly. "I've never seen you here." "Yeah, I'm from the city," the embarrassed girl replied. "I came to my grandmother for vacation." She hoped that this would be enough, and the stranger would leave her alone. But she turned out to be too curious. "Why aren't you dancing?" the girl asked. "I rubbed my leg." Holly leaped. "I'll dance some other time. Just came to watch for now." The stranger shrugged. "Well, suit yourself. Okay, see you later. By the way, I'm Alice." "Holly," the girl replied. But Alice wasn't listening. She went off to dance in such high heels that any model would envy. To be honest, Holly never considered herself a social butterfly. In her college years, she only went to clubs with friends, and that happened only a couple of times. Her mother never allowed her to go anywhere. Holly remembered dance moves vaguely, and she had no idea about waltzes or a guy's hand on her waist. Of course, they weren't waltzing in the club, but the crazy moves everyone was doing looked even worse. Jumping and shaking her head like that was something Holly couldn't master. "Like savages," she muttered to herself. "Why did I even come here?" In the crowd of dancers, Holly spotted her neighbor, the guy who tried to strike up a conversation with her during the day. Now he was decently dressed but still jumping and dancing. His partner turned out to be the same Alice, and they looked impressive together. Holly caught herself watching them with a strange mix of disgust and envy. Although why envy? She didn't want to jump around like a wild thing. Want to dance? A voice asked. The smell of cigarette smoke surrounded the girl. Holly turned around and saw another acquaintance, the big guy who greeted her earlier in the day. He was smoking right in the hall and looked even more repulsive. Or maybe Holly just saw him up close for the first time. He could work as a bouncer in this club if he wanted to. I don't dance. The girl replied quietly. Too bad. Too bad. The big guy shook his head. Well, maybe we can chat then. We still haven't properly introduced ourselves. I'm Chris. And you, Holly? The girl answered. The smell of cigarette smoke made her dizzy. The big guy stood there, couldn't think of anything else to say, and said it again. So, maybe let's dance after all. He repeated. I already said I don't dance. The girl exclaimed, decisively walking away. She struggled to move between the dancers, but still bumped into someone. Of course, that someone turned out to be their annoying neighbor. Oh, neighbor. He grinned. How's it going? Did you manage to sort out the tools? Alice stared at her curiously. Holly blushed. Her reputation here would be quite a flop city girl who couldn't handle gardening tools. Everything's fine. She mumbled. Excuse me. I need to go. What's up with her? The guy asked his companion in surprise. Why is she acting so strange? Alice shrugged. How should I know? Maybe her leg hurts. She said she rubbed it. Holly made her way to the bar, where she could finally catch her breath. She wanted to get lemonade, but only then realized she hadn't brought her wallet. The day was turning out to be worse than she could imagine. The girl behind the counter watched her for a while, then took pity. Maybe you can take something on credit, she said. You can pay me back tomorrow. I think I saw you at Lauren's garden. I trust her. No, thanks. I'll just go home, Holly said. Her mood hit rock bottom. She felt bored and lonely. There wasn't a single person in the club she could talk to. After wandering around the hall for another 10 minutes, unable to find an activity for herself, Holly headed home. During the time she spent in the club, it had become completely dark outside. The street lights in the village weren't on, and the lights in many windows were long gone. She groped her way home and cursed at everything. On top of it all, she twisted her leg and almost fell. What's wrong? Holly grabbed the fence and almost burst into tears. Problems? A voice asked. Holly almost screamed in fright. From the darkness emerged a huge figure in a white t-shirt. Chris. This human the rock finally caught up with her. Everything's fine, Holly said for the umpteenth time that evening. Don't worry, please. What are you so stubborn about? Let me take a look. The big guy bent down and began examining her leg. Holly's heart pounded hard. It was unclear what the guy saw on her leg, but he nodded. All clear. Sprain, or maybe a fracture. You need to see a doctor urgently. I don't need to see any doctor, Holly protested. Nothing hurts anymore. And anyway, my house is just nearby, about 100 meters from here. I manage. The girl clenched her teeth and tried to take a step. Her leg immediately hurt. Apparently, this showed on her face because Chris smirked. I told you it's a fracture, he said. You definitely need to go to the hospital, and as soon as possible. Let me escort you. No need to escort me anywhere. Holly panicked. I'll go there in the morning. And now I need to go home. Let me go. Ignoring the girl's objections, Chris lifted her off the ground, and Holly screamed, pounding his chest with her fists. Let me go. Let me go. We'll go to the hospital. I'll let you go there, the big guy replied. Her punches were like mosquito bites to him. The hospital is in the opposite direction, the girl exclaimed. She had lived in the village for a short time, but she had already learned a few things. It was hard not to notice the white building with an official sign, conveniently located on the way to the store. But we're not going to the hospital. We're going to the infirmary. Chris smirked. They're open both day and night. Holly was completely bewildered with fear. Her punches had no effect on the big guy, and all she had left in her arsenal was her voice. Help! She shouted. Her voice echoed in the distance. Chris laughed. Scream! Scream! Mrs. Boyle lives nearby. She's been deaf for a long time. And then there's old man Horner. He won't rush into a fight. Too much of a coward. So, our Robin Hoods are done, and Spider-Man hasn't visited us. Holly took a deep breath to scream again when someone said, "Put the girl on her feet." Quickly, the big guy, surprised, looked around. Holly could see her savior. It turned out to be her recent acquaintance, the neighbor. Since their last meeting, he hadn't changed at all. The same shirt, the same tousled hair. The only exception was that he was very, very angry. "What do you want?" Chris asked. "Can't you see?" She twisted her leg. "I'm taking her to the infirmary. I'm helping. Yeah, helping so much that she's screaming for the whole village to hear. I'm telling you, let her go nicely. And if I don't let her go, then what?" Chris inquired. "Then I'll help you," the neighbor replied. Without wasting time on long conversations, he kicked Chris in the knee. He unexpectedly squealed with a thin voice and released the girl. If it weren't for Alice's help, who stood nearby and watched everything with amazement, Holly would have undoubtedly fallen to the ground. As it happened, she miraculously managed to stay on her feet. The pain pierced her ankle again. Holly groaned quietly and grabbed the fence. "What's wrong with you?" Alice asked, frightened. "Did he do something to you? Did Chris hit you?" Holly shook her head. "No. I just twisted my leg. It hurts to work." "I told you she had problems with her leg," the big guy said spitefully. "She needs to go to the hospital. You're the one who'll need it now," Holly's neighbor promised him. "If, of course, you don't disappear from sight right now." Far away, Chris scowled angrily but said nothing. Lights started to turn on in the houses nearby. Voices were heard. Some elderly woman leaned out of the window and shouted, "What are you doing here? Ha! Get out, or I'll call the police." Holly's neighbor waved to her. "Mrs. Boyle, everything's fine. They're all locals. We won't make noise. Don't worry." The old lady squinted and nodded with satisfaction. "Todd, is that you? Well, then, okay, stay. Just don't make any noise." She closed the window and disappeared behind the curtain, and Holly looked at Alice with surprise. The big guy, who everyone had temporarily forgotten about, watched them contemptuously. Then he spat on the ground and walked away. "What about an apology? You'll manage without it," Chris replied without looking back. Alice and her companion exchanged glances and unexpectedly burst into laughter, while Holly looked embarrassed. She regretted being an involuntary witness to this scene, behaved like some wild creature, didn't even introduce herself. "Well, better late than never. My name is Holly," she said. "And you, I assume, are Todd. Right? Nice to meet you. And I didn't even tell you my name." "How did you guess?" "Boyle told you by your name," Holly replied. Alice looked at Todd ironically. "You, my dear, are even dumber than Chris. Or did he steal your common sense?" "I hardly recognize you, Todd." Holly watched them and regretted being the third wheel in this situation. The way Alice pronounced the name Todd with a sigh hinted that the relationship between the young people was much closer than just friendship. And Holly found herself in an awkward position as the third wheel. "Your leg really hurts, doesn't it?" Todd asked, looking at Holly with shining eyes. "Did that guy lie?" The girl shook her head. "Unfortunately, he told the plain truth." In a couple of moments, Holly felt a sense of déjà vu because the guy squatted down and began examining her leg. "Nothing serious, just a little strain," he said. "You probably won't make it on your own." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Nevertheless, Holly weakly protested. I'll manage. Of course, I'll manage myself. Todd mimicked her. Finish already with that phrase. Your speech is becoming a bit monotonous. The girl did not expect what happened next. Following the example of the big guy, Todd picked her up and carried her. I can handle it. Holly wanted to shout, but she bit her tongue in time. Uttering that phrase had just been forbidden. With nothing else coming to her mind, she awkwardly fell silent, and Alice fussed around them. Just don't trip, she said to Todd anxiously. The road here's just terrible. She seemed endlessly in love, and Holly felt envy again. She could only dream of something like that. The way to her grandmother's house seemed endless. Holly was very embarrassed by the situation she found herself in. Todd's endless smiles, Alice's laughter. She, the perpetually lonely girl, seemed superfluous here. And she was very relieved when her new acquaintances finally reached the house. Look, it's not locked, Todd remarked. Probably. Grandma is waiting for me, Holly replied. I should tell her to lock the gate in the evenings. There are such types roaming around here. You mean Chris? Todd was surprised. Don't worry, he won't bother you anymore. And if he tries, I'll explain everything. It seems too many years have passed in school, and he managed to forget my lessons. Did you study together? Holly asked, surprised. Yeah, in this very village, Todd confirmed. He was an idiot even back then. Fortunately, our paths diverged. I moved to the city, and Chris stayed here. Seems like he drives a tractor now. Who gave it to him? Alice smirked. He works on a pig farm. Loser. Lauren was amazed to meet this company on her doorstep. Holly, what happened to you? The elderly woman gasped. Did you twist your leg at the dance? Holly blushed. If only Grandma knew how things really were. She hadn't set foot on the dance floor the whole evening at the club. Exactly there, Alice confirmed. Your granddaughter danced so well. The whole hall froze to watch. Holly blushed. Alice looked too pleased, and it was unclear if she was joking or mocking. However, Holly didn't argue. She couldn't tell Grandma about the hooligan. She'd definitely feel unwell then. Sit her down here, the woman ordered, pointing to the chair. Todd gently lowered Holly, like a princess. His careful movements made her heart flutter. Would you like some tea? I also have pie. Stay. Thank you very much, but we're in a hurry, Alice replied. Maybe another time. Okay. Her previous friendliness was gone. She impatiently tapped her foot and looked at Todd. Yeah, we'll go, the guy replied. Have a good evening. Get well soon. He winked at Holly. The couple walked away, leaving Holly alone with her grandmother. She looked at her granddaughter. Did you have a good evening? You did dance, right? Yes, Grandma, Holly sighed. And everyone was looking at me. I'll never forget that day. She couldn't sleep for a long time that night. She tossed and turned, recalling the events of the evening. How the big guy attached himself to her, and how Todd came to her rescue. She tried not to think about Alice. Thinking about her was unpleasant for some reason. The next day, Holly's leg still hurt, and she couldn't work in the garden. However, the unsharpened tools still awaited her in the barn. So, Holly settled under the tree again. She took her laptop, the sharpening stone, a hoe, and tried to figure out what to do with them. How's your leg? Todd asked from behind the fence. Still hurting. Holly looked up and smiled. Even more today than yesterday, but bearable. Oh, by the way, I forgot to thank you yesterday. Thanks for helping there on the road. Always welcome, Todd replied. And don't worry about the leg. It'll pass. I used to do track and field in school. This happened to me a lot. Holly fell silent, not knowing what else to say. If at night, thousands of phrases came to her mind that needed to be said. Now a complete stupor set in. The girl looked at Todd, blinking her eyes, cursing herself for being slow-witted. Did you figure out the tools? Todd asked. Not yet, Holly replied. But I'll figure it out soon. Don't worry, please. Todd wasn't listening anymore. He easily jumped over the fence and approached the girl. How did you work with these? He asked, running his hand along the blade. The tools are sharpened. I didn't even have a chance to work with them. I'll sharpen them, and then I'll deal with the weeds. Let me help. Todd reached for the stone. Come on. It's a 15-minute task for me, and you've been at it for 2 days. Holly handed the stone to the guy and watched him. On that day, Todd was shirtless again, and his muscles bulged like a boxer's. Alice caught them in the midst of this activity. She froze by the fence and disapprovingly asked, "What are you doing here?" "We're sharpening tools," Todd answered her. "There's no decent equipment on this plot. Can you imagine? What a disaster," the girl said coldly. Holly became very uncomfortable, much more than the previous evening when Todd pressed her to his chest. "I can finish it myself," she said. "There's just a bit left. 5 minutes of work," Todd confirmed. "It'll be done soon. Don't worry." Feeling Alice's gaze on her, Holly wanted to disappear into the ground. She hadn't done anything wrong, but somehow she felt guilty. How was that possible? Done. Todd took the last shovel to the barn. "Shall we go to the club tonight?" Alice asked in a strange tone. "Or have you changed your mind?" "Of course, we'll go, as always." Todd nodded. The girl continued to stare at him, and he asked, "Do I have to swear to you?" Alice nodded, turned around, and left. Todd looked at her in surprise. "What's gotten into her?" he muttered. Holly stayed silent. She knew perfectly well what was happening with Alice, but she wouldn't agree to talk about it for anything. Todd said goodbye to her and left. Holly sat for a while and stared straight ahead. She felt heavy in her soul. The day turned out to be very hot, and the girl sat in the shade, doing nothing. The gloomiest thoughts came to her mind, and Holly tried to drive them away as best she could. Closer to noon, Lauren called her into the house. "Holly, I'm asking you, slice some cucumbers, please. I made a salad, and there's a bit left. Can you handle it?" "Of course," Holly smiled. "Grandma, do you really think I still haven't learned to hold a knife? Besides, my leg doesn't hurt as much now. Moreover, you can slice cucumbers sitting down." Lauren nodded. It seemed like Grandma didn't even hear what her granddaughter was saying. The smile left Holly's face. Worried, she asked, "Grandma, are you okay? You seem a bit off." "My heart is heavy, probably because of this heat." "And you kept silent." "Grandma, who cooks in such heat? You should have gone to bed as soon as you felt unwell. Why are you acting like a child?" "I'll lie down for a bit, and it'll pass," Lauren replied. "Don't worry about me. This has happened before." Grandma went to her room, and Holly made the salad and put it in the refrigerator. The girl had no appetite. She approached the door every now and then and listened to her grandmother's breathing. Lauren seemed to be sleeping, but her breathing was heavy, and her face was unusually pale. Towards evening, she called her granddaughter to her. "Are you feeling better, Grandma?" Holly asked cautiously. "Should I call a doctor?" The woman seemed not to hear her. "Holly, if something happens to me, the documents for the house are hidden in the attic," she said. "In the old dresser, the top drawer. My passport is there too. And funeral money." "What are the documents?" "What money?" Holly screamed in panic. "I'm calling a doctor right now." Lauren said something else, but the girl didn't listen anymore. She put on sneakers and, cursing her injured leg, set off. The road to the medical center seemed endless. Every step brought excruciating pain, and Holly worked slowly. At the finish line, another blow awaited her. The medical center was closed. Being on vacation, the girl completely lost track of the days and forgot that today was Sunday. In despair, Holly looked around, not knowing where to turn for help. Her grandmother suffered in the house, maybe even dying, and there was no one around. Only a few children were jumping on a playground. Holly went to them. "Hello," she said excitedly. Kids, do you happen to know where the doctor lives? The children fell silent and stared at her suspiciously. The girl realized that she might seem a bit strange to them, maybe even abnormal, and tried to calm down. So, what? She asked. Do you know or not? The girl with pigtails pointed to the end of the street. There. Brick house. Mr. Colin lives there. And there's a big dog named Cooper in the yard. Holly thanked her and was about to leave when the girl added, but don't go there today. Why? Wondered Holly. Mr. Colin left for the town in the morning. He won't be back until evening, or even at night. He always does that. Goes to visit his son. Hearing this, Holly almost collapsed to the ground. All the way here, all the worries and fears were in vain. She hadn't found any help for her grandmother. In this village, she simply didn't exist. Exhausted from anxiety, she hurried back. The return journey seemed even longer to her. Climbing onto the porch, Holly opened the door and burst into the room. Lauren was lying on the bed, closing her eyes. Her face looked so pale and motionless that the girl screamed in fear. Grandma. Lauren opened her eyes. Why are you screaming like that? She asked weakly. I'm here. Everything is fine. And how is your heart? Holly asked anxiously. It hurts, but it's for the best. The woman said with a sad smile. It means I still have a heart. It would be worse if I felt nothing. You're making jokes. The girl frowned. I went to the paramedic, but he's not there. Now I'll call an ambulance. Lauren tried to object. No need. I'll feel better soon. Why bother people for nothing? Nothing in vain. Holly replied. Just be quiet for a moment. I'll call the hospital now. But this task turned out to be as impossible as finding the paramedic. There was some interference on the phone. The call didn't go through, and when Holly finally got through, they couldn't hear her on the other end. She tossed the phone aside. Like the Stone Age, she moaned. You can't reach anyone. Lauren closed her eyes again. The woman breathed heavily and intermittently. The expression on her face horrified Holly. Unable to stand still, she rushed out of the door. Holly felt like screaming in helplessness. She just couldn't figure out who else to turn to for help. How are you? Won't you come with us to the club to listen to music? Holly turned around. Todd was smiling at her from behind the fence, just as neat and dressed up as the night before. The girl ran to him. How good that you're here. I didn't know who to turn to. Todd, tell me, is there any taxi or someone with a car who can help? I urgently need to get to town. The smile left the guy's face. He asked with concern, what happened? My grandmother is very sick, Holly said. I went to the medical center, but there's no one there. I tried to call an ambulance. No connection. I just don't know what to do. Carry my grandmother on my back or write some telegram. Waiting for an ambulance makes no sense, Todd replied. With our roads, they'll come here in an hour. And that's in the best case. And what should we do? Asked Holly. I'll drive you. I have a car. Bring your grandmother to the gate. I'll be there in a moment. Without waiting for an answer, Todd headed to the garage. The girl watched him go and rushed into the house. Grandma, get ready, she shouted. We're going to the hospital now. Todd will take us. When they stepped outside, the car was already parked by the gate. Holly was amazed. She didn't know what she expected, but certainly not this shining car resembling a tank. Gathering herself, Holly turned to Lauren. Sit in the back seat, Grandma. It will be more comfortable for you. She herself sat next to Todd. The car started, and Holly breathed a sigh of relief. At least they were on their way, and with each passing moment, they were getting closer to the hospital. Around the next turn, they encountered Alice. Seeing Todd's car, the girl opened her mouth in surprise. Where are you going? She shouted. Todd waved to her. I'll explain later. He shouted. Go home. Holly felt very uncomfortable when she noticed how Alice looked at her. It seemed she deeply regretted helping her the night before. "We'll hit the road and speed up once we're on the highway," Todd promised, as if nothing special had happened. "How are you, Grandma?" Holly asked. Lauren's weak voice replied with something. All thoughts about their angered Alice immediately flew out of Holly's mind. All of that became irrelevant. The only thing that concerned Holly at that moment was her grandmother's health. Todd kept his word. As soon as they turned onto the highway, the man pressed the gas pedal to the floor. Holly squeaked in fear and clutched the seat. "Is this really safe?" she asked. "Maybe we should drive a bit slower." "Don't worry, everything will be fine," Todd reassured the girl. "I have a lot of experience. In high school, Chris and I used to race around here in his car." These words didn't reassure Holly too much, but she didn't argue. For Lauren's sake, the girl was ready to walk to town. They reached the hospital in half an hour. Holly rushed to the registration desk first, but due to nervousness, she couldn't find the words. Once again, Todd came to her rescue. "We brought a woman. She's in bad shape," he said. "Heart problems. We need to see a doctor urgently." Lauren was left at the hospital that evening. The doctor told Holly that they brought her just in time. "Your grandmother has acute heart failure," he explained. "We couldn't delay." The girl looked at Todd gratefully. "Todd, thank you. If it weren't for your help, I don't know if I could have saved my grandmother or not." "It wasn't difficult for me," Todd reassured her. "At least I got some fresh air. Haven't driven like that in 100 years." Holly remembered Alice. She doubted she would agree with his words. Alice was probably still furious. Holly froze at the thought of how she would greet her next time. Todd yawned and asked, "Talk about something, please. This trip exhausted me. I might fall asleep at the wheel." Conversations, especially with the opposite sex, were challenging for Holly. But she had no choice. She sighed and mumbled hesitantly, "I can tell you about myself. Honestly, there's nothing interesting in my life. I work as a lawyer." "A lawyer?" Todd was surprised. Such a lovely girl studying laws. Wouldn't have thought. His comment about her appearance embarrassed Holly. No one had ever told her she was lovely. "What do you think I should do?" she asked. "I don't even know. Maybe something like arranging bouquets or painting pictures. In short, doing something beautiful." "What do you do?" Holly asked, trying to hide her embarrassment. "I'm a sales specialist," Todd said. "Endless reports, plans. Just on vacation now, taking a break from all of that. Life in the village somehow feels simpler, more genuine. You know." "What were you passionate about in your youth?" Holly asked, just to avoid talking about herself. "You mentioned something about athletics." "Passionate," Todd repeated thoughtfully. "Well, a bit of everything. Did boxing. Was on the swimming team for a while. Went on hikes. Can't remember everything." Holly listened to Todd, and a sense of inadequacy overwhelmed her. He was passionate about so many things, could talk about a lot. And she, there was simply nothing to mention. "As soon as I get back to the city, I'll start painting again," she promised herself. No more excuses about not having time and not having talent. "I'm probably duller than a village old lady." The road back to the village passed unnoticed. Holly hadn't had a chance to look around, and the car stopped near her house. "So, tomorrow back to the hospital?" Todd asked. "Will you go visit your grandmother?" "Yes, I'll get up early and go," Holly said. "The first bus seems to leave at 6 in the morning. Visitors aren't accepted in the hospital at that time. I'll pick you up at 8. "No need, really," Holly said. "You've already helped enough. I can manage from there." "With what did he help you?" Alice asked. "And where are you going tomorrow morning?" Holly flinched and looked at her. Alice stood near the gate, burning with anger. "We went to the hospital," Holly muttered, but no one heard her. "You promised first that we would go to the club, and then you went to the city with her," Alice shouted. "I dressed up for you like an idiot. Was looking forward to this evening. Put on makeup. We went to the hospital." Todd raised his voice. Didn't my mother tell you? I won't believe for a second that you didn't go to her. It's not like you to the hospital. Was she being treated there? Alice asked, nodding at Holly. Interesting. For what? I thought you were a normal guy, but you're just like Chris. All you guys are the same. Alice burst into tears and ran away. Todd watched her go. Holly sighed and put her hand on his shoulder. Don't worry so much. Tomorrow you'll meet, talk, and make up. Alice will understand everything. There's no other way. Not sure? Todd mumbled. You don't know her. If Alice boils, she won't stop. Well, whatever. Should I apologize to her for saving a person? Thank you, Holly said once again. And forgive me for how everything turned out. Todd waved his hand. Tomorrow at 8, he repeated. Be ready. Holly watched his car and went into the house. Without Lauren, it was empty and lonely there. And after what happened at the gate, the girl felt simply awful. Early in the morning, Holly stood on the porch, impatiently tapping her foot. Todd was already 10 minutes late, and she was very worried. Not because she might be late for the hospital. She just couldn't understand what caused this delay. The darkest thoughts crawled into her head. Finally, Todd's car stopped in front of her house. Holly cautiously opened the door and asked hesitantly, "May I?" "Of course," Todd answered with surprise. What a strange question. "Why do you think I came here?" Holly sat in the front seat, clutching the bag with her grandmother's things to her chest. She couldn't bring herself to look at the guy. The car started moving. The young people didn't speak to each other until the village was left behind. Only then did Todd start a conversation. "You girls are strange," he said gloomily. Holly looked at him. The guy had dark circles under his eyes. It seemed like he hadn't slept all night. His facial expression was mournful. "Did you talk to Alice?" Holly guessed. "How is she?" "The same as yesterday," Todd replied, "cursing both of us and refusing to hear anything. She's convinced there's something between us, and you can't convince her otherwise. As if sharpening a hoe for someone is equivalent to a marriage proposal. Nonsense." Holly blushed and lowered her gaze. She was relieved that Todd was occupied with driving and couldn't see her facial expression. It felt like she was about to flare up, burned together with the seat. "Alice will forgive you," Holly said uncertainly. "You've known each other for so many years. She can't just erase everything like that." "How do you know how many years we've known each other?" Todd smirked. "Maybe I met her, just like you, a few days ago at the club." The girl was confused. "You just looked so close," she mumbled. "So I thought you've known Alice for a long time." "You actually guessed." Todd nodded. "We went to the same school. Alice is 4 years younger than me. Back then, I didn't even look at her. She tied all those ribbons and laughed so loudly that it could be heard on the other end of the football field. In short, mediocrity. And now, I come on vacation. And, look, the girl has changed. Well, on nerves. She works the same way as in childhood. If I had known in advance, I wouldn't have gotten involved." Holly felt a bit relieved. It turns out she didn't ruin some strong, long-standing relationship. At best, it could have been a school crush. And even that from Alice's side. Todd's heart definitely wasn't seriously affected. Holly thought about it and immediately scolded herself. In any case, was it right to interfere in someone else's relationship? On the other hand, Holly hadn't done anything wrong. She just wanted to help her grandmother, and there was no blame on her for someone imagining something fantastical in this story. "I need to call my mom," Holly said when they were close to the hospital. "Yesterday I didn't tell her about Grandma not feeling well. Mom will be upset if I don't tell her." "Call. I understand everything. And what's the point in hiding?" Todd replied. Holly's mother was terribly worried when she heard that Lauren was in the hospital. Madison gathered so quickly that she arrived at the hospital almost faster than them. "Forgive me, Mom. I couldn't save Grandma." "No use from me at all." Madison seemed as if she hadn't heard her. For a while, She couldn't take her astonished gaze off Todd and his car. Then she asked her daughter, Holly, who did you come with? Will you introduce us? Of course. Holly led Madison to the car and introduced the guy. Meet my mom, Madison. Todd. This is my mom, Madison. Todd nodded at the woman. He didn't seem particularly thrilled about this introduction. Madison, on the other hand, smiled. Nice to meet you, she said. A neighbor, huh? I hardly know anyone in the village except for my mother. Maybe a couple of classmates from back in the day. And that's about it. Now I've met you. What decent people we have around here. For some reason, Holly felt embarrassed and nudged her mother towards the door. Let's go to Grandma, Mom. That's why we're here. We need to check with the doctors about how she's doing. Smiling, Madison headed to the hospital. As soon as they entered the lobby, she whispered, How did you meet him, Holly? Didn't expect that from you. A guy like him with a car like that must cost a fortune. Mom, Todd has a girlfriend. Holly stopped her. So don't fantasize. There's nothing between us. Oh, her mother said disappointedly. Too bad. I thought you got yourself a lucky catch. I think when Aaron got a lucky catch, you were furious. The girl replied. Madison retorted, You call that loser Sam a lucky catch? That man was the worst thing that could happen in your sister's life. A real disaster. They found Lauren's attending physician and inquired about her condition. She was feeling much better that day, and they were allowed to visit her. Holly burst into the room and rushed to the bed. Hello, Grandma. How are you? Is your heart not hurting anymore? Lauren's face lit up at the sight of her granddaughter. Holly, my girl, she murmured, hugging her. My savior. It doesn't hurt, dear. Thanks to you and Todd. Tell him thank you from me. Okay, Todd. Her mother raised a concern. But he's waiting in the parking lot. What does this guy have to do with it? Tell me everything in detail. When Holly told her the whole story, omitting Alice's part, her mother was delighted. Sweetie, he really likes you, she whispered in her ear. Believe me, men don't just help like that. Come on, Mom. The girl waved her off. I already said Todd and I are just friends. Silly girl. It depends on you, whether you are friends or something more. Holly, you're like a little kid sometimes. 30 years on this earth, and you still don't know life. This topic was unpleasant for Holly, and she changed the subject, asking her grandmother about what needed to be done in the garden. She conveyed greetings from a neighbor. When they said goodbye to Lauren and headed downstairs, her mother grabbed Holly by the elbow and asked, I hope you're coming back to the village now. Not to our home. Yes, Holly replied. You heard Grandma ask me to water the flowers. Most importantly, don't let Todd slip away. We can't afford that. On the porch, Madison waved to the guy. Fortunately, Todd didn't notice. He was busy typing something on his phone. Holly herself didn't understand why she liked Todd. Was it because of his kind nature or simply because she hadn't met anyone better? Thanks for waiting, she said, getting back into the car. We can head to the village. How's Lauren? Todd asked. I don't know, but she's better than yesterday. The girl sighed. After all, we saved her, you and I. So, shall we celebrate somehow? Todd suggested. Go to a cafe, order something sweet. I heard it lifts the mood. Holly couldn't find words to respond. She really wanted to agree, but decency didn't allow it. Taking him away from Alice and occupying her place in the cafe. How would people view that? Silence means consent. Todd nodded. So, we're going. This is just a stroll, Holly told herself mentally. Not a date. Just a friendly lunch at a cafe. I'm not doing anything wrong. Convinced in this way, Holly relaxed a bit and gradually started a conversation. You know, Todd, I'm actually an artist, and I'd like to paint your portrait, she said. May I? Why? Todd wondered. Am I some kind of celebrity? You helped me at a moment when no one else was around, and that means a lot. And where will this portrait end up? Todd asked. How much will it fetch at an auction? Holly shrugged. I have no idea. I'll give it to you as a memento of our meeting. So, are you okay with that? Probably. Yes, Todd replied. As long as you don't make me sit for hours pretending to have a philosophical gaze. I'll give this portrait to my mom. Let her enjoy it. She always complains that she sees me too rarely. My portrait will always be there, right above the stove in the kitchen. I'll annoy her with my presence even more. Holly nodded with a smile. Todd grinned. I guessed right when I said you should do something artistic. So, you're not a lawyer, after all, but an artist. Only in my free time, Holly said. And free time is a rare commodity at our firm. We're in a constant state of force majeure. The girl couldn't remember the last time she talked so much. Generally, she was reserved, and only Erin could draw her into a candid conversation. Now, Holly couldn't stop herself. She recalled a bunch of amusing stories from her life that she had completely forgotten. Todd wasn't laughing at her, but with her. Holly felt like she had never been happier. They returned home in the evening, but even then, it seemed to her that she hadn't told Todd everything. She wanted to chat with him until the morning, revealing her entire life, just to continue seeing his smile. However, upon seeing her grandmother's house, domestic duties overwhelmed Holly. Flowers, she exclaimed. I promised Grandma to water the plants. Sorry, Todd, I need to run. What flowers? The guy wondered. It's dark outside. Your garden can wait until tomorrow. Holly shook her head. No, I promised. It's okay. I'll handle it quickly. Todd sighed and got out of the car. Fine, I'll help you. Let's consider it a night workout. A substitute for the gym. I've already let myself go on vacation. Without changing, Holly rushed to the barn and grabbed watering cans. She and Todd got to work. Holly ran back and forth in the yard, accidentally bumping into the guy. She accidentally poured water from her can onto Todd's pants. Holly apologized. Excuse me, please. Nonsense. Todd smiled. It'll dry. It would be worse if there was manure in your watering can. The girl nervously chuckled, but then fell silent, grabbing Todd's hand. He looked at her in surprise. What's wrong? Do you hear it? Holly whispered. There, in the bushes. They froze. The bushes swayed slightly in the wind, but there was no noticeable movement among them. What's there? Todd asked. Seems like someone is there. Holly whispered. I heard a twig snap. Who could it be? The guy chuckled. Maybe a stray cat. Wait, I'll check. Todd started looking into the bushes. He stood like that for a few moments and returned to Holly. There's no one there, he said. But I heard something. Holly insisted. I'm sure I didn't imagine it. Are you sure you're not into horror movies? Todd asked. Seems likely. I even started to believe there was someone there at some point. Maybe I did imagine it after all, Holly said. Well, never mind. Let's finish up and get some sleep. It's almost midnight. As she spoke, the girl continued to glance around. She wasn't at all sure that the suspicious sounds were just her imagination. Holly absolutely heard someone break a twig in the bushes, and a small stray cat couldn't have caused that. When they said goodbye, Todd asked, meeting tomorrow at 8. You enjoyed being a taxi driver that much? Holly smiled. The guy shrugged. Not really. But if I get such a nice passenger every time, why not? It's simply impossible. He had long gone, and Holly kept looking at the road, smiling. Did Todd really consider her nice? Behind her, a rustle was heard again, pulling her out of her thoughts. Holly turned around and looked fearfully at the bushes. They were swaying, and it didn't seem to be because of the wind. Holly had never run so fast. She even forgot about her leg, which hadn't fully recovered from their encounter with Chris. What importance did a sore ankle have when her life might be at stake? Silly, Holly muttered, slamming the door behind her. Who could be there? Her inner voice asked. What if Chris is hiding there? Came to get back at you. Who knows what's on his mind?" Without turning on the lights, she approached the window. From here, the yard looked completely dark. It was impossible to see anything. Then the light came on in the neighbor's house. Holly felt a bit calmer. Todd was there, nearby. In the worst case, I can scream and call for his help. The girl reassured herself. Nothing bad will happen to me. And what could happen when there's actually no one in the bushes? Even though Holly comforted herself this way, she couldn't believe her own words. She stared out the window, still feeling like someone was there. This night, Holly couldn't fall asleep. She lay in bed, listening to the sounds in the yard. At times, she imagined hearing someone's footsteps on the porch. Then, the girl would jump up and rush to the window. Due to the accumulated stress and lack of sleep, she felt completely shattered by morning. At 8 a.m., Holly left the house and immediately heard the neighbor's voice. "Hey, how was your night?" She turned around. Todd was waving at her from behind the fence. He looked much better than the morning before. Apparently, unlike her, he had a good night's sleep. "Fine," the girl lied. "And how about you?" "Also fine," the guy replied. "Just my iron horse acting up. Doesn't want to start. Looks like our trip is postponed. Wait a bit." "Okay, I'll work my magic on it, and then we'll go." "Sure," Holly nodded. "I'm not in a hurry. Take your time with your car." She didn't want to go back inside. To pass the time, she started strolling through the garden, noting which plants needed watering and where weeding was required. "Hey, you," someone called from behind the fence. "Come here. We need to talk." It was Alice, looking even worse than Holly, who hadn't slept all night. Holly approached the gate cautiously. She didn't know what to expect from this visitor and felt some guilt, as if she had genuinely stolen someone else's guy, although such thoughts never crossed her mind. "Good morning," Holly mumbled, although this greeting probably sounded sarcastic. Could it be called good? Alice didn't pay attention to her words. "Waiting for my Todd again?" she asked, planning to keep chasing him. "I'm not chasing him," Holly replied. "Todd offered to give me a ride to the city, and, of course, you agreed." Alice smirked. "When I first saw you, I thought you were just an ordinary little lamb. Nothing special. Turns out you're a heart thief. Pretended to be innocent, gained trust, and stole my guy." "But I didn't want to steal anything," Holly exclaimed. Alice nodded, "And rightly so. Because I won't give Todd to you. Understood?" "Gray mouse." Alice turned around and proudly walked away. Watching her straight back and her sunlit hair, Holly indeed felt like a complete nobody. Todd was still fussing around his car. Holly could see his back if she approached the fence. Suddenly, her own behavior seemed ugly, vile, and disgusting to her. It seemed like she was acting like those girls her mother always mocked. Bold, immoral individuals heading to resorts in the hope of finding trouble. The only difference was that Holly went not to a Palm Beach, but to an ordinary village. Holly couldn't stand still and wait for Todd any longer. Alice was right. It was time to put an end to this. She closed the gate and headed to the bus stop. Despite easily catching the bus, she walked quickly, as if afraid of being pursued. In a sense, that's what it felt like. She couldn't escape. After 20 minutes, Todd caught up with her at the bus stop. "And what do you call this?" he asked. "I'm calling her from behind the fence, and she's on the highway. I almost broke down your door, thinking you might be lying there unconscious." From his hotful gaze, Holly felt ashamed. "Sorry for not warning you," she said. "I decided not to bother you. How long can I take advantage of your kindness? I don't want your entire vacation to be spent on me." "And couldn't you have warned me?" Todd asked. "Decent people at least give a heads up so they aren't searched for." "Sorry," said Holly. No other words came to her mind. Todd looked at her attentively. "What happened? I can see you didn't just go to the bus stop for no reason. Explain to me." What's going on? Holly remained silent. Alice came, didn't she? How do you know? The girl wondered, expected something like that from her. That's Alice. Yeah, she did come to see me. Holly confessed. We talked a bit. And what did she say? Was she rude to you? Knowing Alice, you can expect anything from her. No, she wasn't rude. Holly exclaimed. It's just, you know, Todd, I realize that you and I can't communicate. It hurts Alice. And, in general, hurt Alice. The guy laughed. That's hilarious. First of all, we had nothing serious with her. Just went to the club in the evenings. No marriage proposals. You can believe me. And Alice has such hurt every month. And it's always something different. Once she was dating Kelvin the mechanic. Then Harry from the farm. Once, imagine this, she even went on a date with Chris. And after all that, you say we caused her some kind of pain. Holly shrugged. I don't know. It still doesn't feel right to interfere in other people's relationships. It's just not good. There were no relationships. The guy replied. And there never were. Let's end it here. So, are you getting in the car or not? Are we going? Holly looked at the approaching bus. Then she shifted her gaze to Todd's car, sighed heavily, and nodded. We're going. Settling into the car, Holly thought to herself that Todd hadn't said anything about whether there was any relationship between them or not. If you thought about it, he should have laughed at the idea that Alice suspected anything at all. But there was none of that. It seemed he genuinely believed that things between him and Holly were not that simple. On that day, the girl limited herself to visiting the hospital. Todd hinted that they could go somewhere else. Take a walk. Talk. But Holly gently declined. The garden needs attention, she said. Imagine, Grandma comes back from the hospital, and everything in the garden has withered. We might have to call an ambulance again. Grandma's plants are sacred. I understand. Todd sighed. I promised my mom to help her in the greenhouse too. Okay, we'll postpone the fun until tomorrow. Maybe we'll have a couple of free hours then. Holly returned home and spent the rest of the day in the garden. The conversation with Alice completely overshadowed her nighttime fears. She was ready to laugh at herself for being afraid of some stray cat. Who would be watching her house? She wasn't some important person or a superstar. Journalists didn't chase her around. Yet, with the onset of darkness, her anxiety returned. She finished her work, returned to the house, and firmly locked the door. Then she closed the curtains, preventing herself from succumbing to the temptation to rush to the window again. She hadn't slept a wink the previous night. At this rate, she would turn into a panda with dark circles around her eyes. This was not how Holly envisioned her vacation at all. After dinner, the girl went to bed. She fell asleep instantly. The cares of the day and the recent sleepless night took their toll. No nightmares haunted Holly. Although recent anxieties should have left their mark, the horrors chose to manifest themselves in reality, in the form of the sound of breaking glass and the neighbor's scream. Holly, wake up. The girl opened her eyes in fright. Todd leaned over her, shaking her by the shoulders. Seeing that she was awake, he pointed to the door. We need to go. What happened? Holly sat up, hugged herself with her arms, and looked around. Where's this smoke coming from? Even in the twilight, the air in the room looked blue with smoke. It smelled of burning wood. Holly felt like she hadn't fully woken up yet. Todd's appearance in this smoke seemed too fantastical. Fire, Todd replied shortly. We need to get out of here. Holly barely had time to grab her grandma's sweater from the chair to cover her nightgown when Todd pulled her onto the porch. There was no visible fire, but the smell of smoke was present here too. Where's the fire? Holly asked, looking around. The shed is on fire, Todd grimly answered. Lauren, did she store gasoline or something like that in there? No, of course not, the frightened girl replied. But why did it catch fire at all? I'd like to know that too. I got up at night to smoke, looked out the window, and there was a fire on your plot. The shed, where tools were kept, was blazing like a matchstick. A dreadful thought crossed Holly's mind. The fire could spread to the house. The shed is very close. Sparks could be carried by the wind. We need to put it out. Todd grabbed her hand. Stay put. Do you want to get burned? I've already called the fire department. They'll be here in a couple of minutes. Holly couldn't take her eyes off the burning shed. How did this happen? She whispered. There was no fire nearby. No one was burning bonfires. And Grandma didn't store anything dangerous. Todd didn't answer but unexpectedly let go of her hand and went somewhere. Holly followed him with her eyes. The guy pulled a canister from the bushes and thoughtfully twirled it in his hands. Yours? He asked, pointing to Holly's discovery. She shook her head. I've never seen it at Grandma's. Well, there's the answer to your question of how this happened. Todd replied. Someone just gave it a little push. He unscrewed the cap and sniffed the contents of the canister. Smells like gasoline. They probably wanted to reach the house too, but didn't make it. Or they didn't have the courage. She always knew how to curse more. She. Holly repeated. Who are you talking about? Todd didn't have time to answer. A fire engine approached their house, and everyone got to work. Firefighters tackled the blaze. Todd said something to their leader, and Holly desperately wrapped herself in a sweater, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. She felt like everyone was staring at her bare legs sticking out from under the short nightgown. Although, of course, that wasn't the case. By sunrise, everything was over. The firefighters bid farewell to Holly and left, and Todd approached the girl. I hope you won't be mad at me for lying a little to them. The man muttered. Lying? How? Holly was surprised. Told them we were to blame. We lit a bonfire in the evening and didn't put it out completely. That's how the fire started. I don't mind, of course, but I don't understand why you did that. Todd sighed. Because it's all Alice's doing. No one else. Alice. That can't be. The girl nervously laughed. Why not? Todd countered. She can. Who else in the village argued with you besides her? Who came to you with threats? And those rustlings in the bushes? Now I'm just sure that it wasn't your imagination that evening. She was probably lurking around even then. Holly remained silent. Todd's words just didn't fit into her head. To jeopardize someone's life for the sake of romantic intrigue. Unthinkable. Yet, this explanation seemed plausible. At least, Holly couldn't come up with any other. What should I do? She asked. If I just leave it like this, what if she comes up with something else? Tries to burn me alive again or attacks Grandma when she returns from the hospital someday? Don't worry. Todd reassured her. She won't do anything else. I'll talk to her and explain that she can't expect anything. There's nothing between us, and there can't be, especially after what happened today. The guy left, and Holly went into the house to change. After the firefighters' work, the garden was in complete disarray. Grandma will definitely be upset. They broke her favorite hydrangea. Working in the garden helped the girl forget a little. Towards lunchtime, Todd arrived. He looked as gloomy as in the morning. Holly looked at him and asked, Did you talk to Alice? Did she confess to arson? It doesn't matter. The guy replied. She won't bother you anymore. Let's not dwell on it. I'd better help you deal with the shed. After today, it's only good for demolition. So let's not waste time and get to work. The rest of her vacation, Holly spent mostly in the garden. A couple of times, she went to the hospital, but taking care of Grandma was mainly on medicine. By the time her grandmother returned home, the plot looked almost the same as before. Only the place where the shed used to be stood empty. We'll probably sell this house, Holly told Todd. Grandma agreed to move to the city and live with us after all. It's a pity, of course, to part with this place. I have so many memories connected to it. Good or not so good? The guy asked. Both, Holly replied. Of course, it's hard to call the story with the shed pleasant, but there were many other events, like watering the flowers, for example. Todd winked. That too. The girl smiled. They fell silent. Holly thought for a moment and sighed. I guess we won't see each other again. The vacation is over. Our story too. I'm going back to work, so what? Todd was surprised. As if we're going to work around the clock without weekends. We have plenty of time for everything. I assure you, do you really want to be with me? Holly asked. Honest word, honest word. Todd replied. He kept his word. They continued to see each other even upon returning to the city. Todd would pick her up after work, and they would go out to dinner, always to some restaurant where entering was intimidating for Holly. His salary was good, and the girl even suffered from an inferiority complex. It seemed almost indecent to her that she couldn't pay for dinner herself. When Holly dared to share her thoughts with Todd, he laughed. It's customary for the man to pay on dates. Didn't you know that? And besides, it's against having women work. I understand times are different now, but men should fight for their place in the sun. A wife's job is to take care of the family hearth, provide comfort and peace at home. Am I right? What do you think? He asked the waitress. She nodded and smiled. It didn't convince Holly too much. She understood that waiters were unlikely to engage in arguments with their customers. Any whim for your money. Todd and Holly got married in October, right in the midst of autumn. All their relatives gathered at the wedding celebration. Erin came with her husband, and her mother started casting stern looks at their unsuitable son-in-law again. Erin paid no attention to them. She was busy with her younger sister. How are you? Happy? She asked Holly. Judging by your eyes. Yes, but I want to hear it from you personally. I don't even know what I feel right now. Holly admitted. Seems like I'm happy, but it feels like all of this is happening to someone else. Some excitement, even distrust. Like I've entered a fairy tale. A fairy tale? Huh? Erin muttered, looking at her husband. Does that mean he's the prince? Todd walked around the hall, talking to guests, mostly with his colleagues and business partners. He called it maintaining necessary connections. In a formal suit, with carefully groomed hair, Todd looked especially impressive. Holly suddenly remembered Alice. If not for that vacation in the village, Alice could be in her place now. Sly guy, Erin observed, watching Todd. Now I understand why he made it big. It couldn't have been otherwise. How did you catch him? I wonder. I don't know myself, Holly admitted. I still can't wrap my head around how I became his wife. The music played in the hall. The lights were dimmed halfway, and Todd got lost in the crowd. Erin soon got up from her seat. I'll go touch up my makeup, she informed her sister. Tired of sitting in one place. I can't dance. Don't like big feasts. Came here only for you. I hope you appreciate that. Of course, I'll appreciate it. Erin, Holly smiled. Go, save your husband. Even from here, I can see that our mother is talking Sam's ear off, probably trying to find out how much he earns. You're right. Erin nodded. I'll go rescue him. Compared to your fiancé, my Sam looks modest. I need to save him. I'm even willing to dance for his salvation. Her sister left, and Holly stayed at the table. She drank champagne, absent-mindedly smiled at the guests, and accepted congratulations. It couldn't have been better. The evening was simply beautiful. Erin returned to her after half an hour, visibly upset and with even more smeared makeup than before. Holly looked at her in fear. What happened? Did you quarrel with Mom? Why do you look like that? Her sister shook her head. Not with Mom. Although, not true. With her too. Then with whom? Holly asked. Erin didn't answer. She reached for the bottle of brandy and poured herself an almost full glass. To your health. She nodded to her sister. Holly watched her with wide eyes. Erin, what happened? She asked. What's gotten into you? You don't drink at all. You'll feel bad. I'll be fine. Erin retorted. Anyway, better than now. It can't get any worse. She took a huge sip and coughed. Holly handed her a slice of lemon. Try this. It might help. Holly watched her with concern. Well, how is it? I'll survive. Erin responded. You know, Sam and I will probably head home. I'm not feeling well. I told you not to drink. Holly said. I'll keep that in mind. Erin nodded. Well, good luck to you in married life. And in general. She hugged her sister and, swaying slightly, headed towards her husband. Holly anxiously watched her, but soon lost her in the crowd. Todd was to blame for this. He appeared out of nowhere, kissed his wife on the cheek. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? He asked. Who dared to scare my beloved? Erin. She's behaving strangely, and I can't figure out what's wrong. Interesting. Todd became wary. From this moment, tell me more. What exactly is her strangeness? I don't even know how to explain, said Holly. She left to talk to our mother and seemed perfectly calm. But when she came back, it was like she was replaced. Her look was almost frightened. Her lips were trembling, and she drank brandy. Erin, my sister, who even detests champagne, wanted to drink. So, maybe it's all about Madison. Todd asked. You just said your sister wanted to talk to her. Holly looked at her mother with doubt and nodded. Maybe, though it's hard to believe. There must be something else. Seems like my mother-in-law is a dangerous woman. Todd smirked. I'll keep that in mind. I have a very responsible position. I can't afford to indulge in alcohol. It's better to stay away from your mother. Who knows what might happen? Todd managed to distract Holly, and she eventually forgot about her musings. This episode gradually faded from her memory. She unexpectedly remembered it now. After Todd introduced her to his mistress, everything good between them was simply erased from Holly's memory. She couldn't have imagined that everything would turn out this way. They lived a normal life with Todd. He worked, and she took care of the house, just as Todd wanted. At his insistence, Holly quit her job shortly after the wedding. It wasn't exactly fun for her at home, but household chores distracted her from negative thoughts. Throughout their years of marriage, she couldn't conceive a child. The only pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. Holly blamed herself for it. Maybe I'm too old, she told herself, even though she had just turned 40. I missed my chance. Todd didn't directly blame her, but Holly could sense what he was thinking. And after he spoke to her face to face, there was no doubt. You were a pauper, and you remain a pauper. Todd sneered. He shouted this phrase directly at her, in front of his audacious friend, Rebecca. It turns out he really considered his wife a failure, a pathetic housewife, the biggest misfortune of his life. In fact, preparing for this conversation, Todd didn't intend to insult his wife. His feelings for Holly had long cooled, yet he believed she deserved some respect, a memory of their past. Todd saved her from the fire. Then Holly became his wife and took care of their shared home. She carried his child, whom she couldn't ultimately give birth to. All of this was no joke. Todd genuinely tried to speak kindly, but it turned out the way it did. It's her fault, he told himself. She let herself go, turned into some gray mouse. And all this talk about money. Did Holly really think she had a right to anything? Their apartment came from my father, and she didn't turn a penny afterward. Just a burden. Todd somehow forgot that he himself prohibited his wife from working. He started cheating on Holly a long time ago, just a few months after the wedding. But all those were meaningless affairs, as he called them. Todd was a visible man, and women flirted with him on their own. How could he resist? Casual acquaintances on business trips, waitresses, even the boss's secretary. Todd himself could barely remember how many mistresses he had. Yet, family life, as he believed, was sacred. So, it never went beyond brief affairs until Rebecca entered his life. More precisely, his work life. She came there for an interview, one of the few candidates vying for a spot in his department. The boss was in a hurry that day and left his work to Todd. We need someone in your department anyway, said the director. So, Find a suitable candidate. You've been working with us for a long time. You know their atmosphere and needs. So go ahead. Todd was not thrilled by this offer at all. Deep down, he held the belief that he should only deal with what he was paid for. Talking to a crowd of jobless losers now looking for a place to fit in wasn't part of his duties. The first two candidates only confirmed his fears. Worn-out middle-aged men, with a guilty look and a complete lack of initiative. Todd politely nodded at them and pointed to the door. Rebecca, who appeared after them, was entirely different. Striking, confident, her eyes sparkling. Todd momentarily forgot that he was in an interview. "Good day," he said. "Rebecca, if I'm not mistaken, correct?" The girl nodded. "My reputation precedes me. As I understand it, more like your resume." Todd smirked. "I've studied it thoroughly, but I'd be glad if you told me about yourself. In more detail. Why do you want to work specifically in our company? What are your strengths? I'd be interested to know everything." Rebecca stared at him, her eyes green. "My strengths," she repeated. "I was born to win. I was the best in school, in college, and even at my previous job. I rose to the position of deputy department head." Todd raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Why did you leave then if everything was fine?" he asked. "Not on the scale I want." The girl grimaced. "A small company dealing with stationery. Being the deputy head of the department there is not an honorable position. It's a mockery, is that so?" Todd asked. "What do you want to achieve here then?" Rebecca smiled. "First and foremost, gain new knowledge. I think I can learn something interesting here, and my experience will benefit you. I quickly grasp things. Don't doubt it." Todd himself didn't know what impressed him. On the one hand, Rebecca could turn out to be just an ordinary upstart. All these loud statements sounded like ordinary chatter. On the other hand, for some reason, he wanted to see this girl again, talk to her one more time. But suggesting a date to Rebecca after rejecting her at the interview seemed a bit too much. When the next day the director asked Todd about his decision, he mentioned Rebecca's name. "A woman. Didn't expect that from you. I remember you saying that women have little brains, and you wouldn't let any of them into sales. Why such a sudden change? Did you change yourself?" A promising candidate came along, Todd replied. "A very prospective girl, and she has good recommendations from her previous job." The man was lying when he uttered these words. He hadn't seen any recommendations for Rebecca, and didn't even think of asking. For him, all of the girl's qualifications were written on her face. Rebecca truly lived up to his expectations. From the very first day in her new position, she delved into the work, grasped everything, and asked a bunch of questions. Even during lunch breaks, she stayed at her desk, sipping tea and flipping through some papers. Todd, for some reason, feared that their initial meeting would turn out to be a deception. That this promising professional would behave just like a gossiping colleague from their accounting department, spending time on the internet. But those fears did not materialize. At the end of the workday, Rebecca approached him with some documents. "Todd," the girl said, "could you answer a couple of questions? Do you want to interview me?" Todd joked, but quickly corrected himself. "Of course, go ahead." Flirting in the workplace was not the right time. "I don't understand something in these papers," she said. "I think there's a mistake here. Take a look." Todd took the documents, looked at them, then frowned. "Yes, you're right." "What does this report consist of?" "Nicholas," Rebecca replied. "His signature is here." At the very bottom, Todd sighed heavily. Nicholas was an old employee of their company, practically a veteran. With age, his memory began to fail him. Nicholas had long been a headache for Todd. He was tired of double-checking documents for him. And now, the result. He missed an error. "Thank you, Rebecca, for your alertness," Todd said. "What alertness?" The girl smirked. "I don't like that phrase. It sounds like I reported on Nicholas. Let's keep this between us." I don't want to start my work at your company with such actions. Rebecca, I understand everything, but the effective management of sales determines the operation of our company. Todd replied, I can't promise you anything. I just hope that in the future, you'll be equally attentive. The girl didn't argue with him. Instead, she unexpectedly asked, Are you in a hurry, and what's the matter? Todd wondered, I would like to ask you a few more questions to quickly get into the work. Would you like to have dinner at the cafe around the corner? I've been there before. They have excellent cuisine. Todd was silent, unsure of how to respond. Their offer was tempting. The new colleague seemed to read his thoughts, and yet, nothing like this had ever happened in his life, at least in the workplace. Rebecca made a shy face and lowered her gaze. Sorry, please. I understand that I'm asking for too much. Then let's talk during working hours tomorrow. Goodbye. She turned to leave, and Todd finally pulled himself together. Wait. I haven't refused you yet. I just got confused. I wouldn't mind discussing work with you, bringing a young specialist up to speed. Let's go to the cafe. Contrary to expectations, during dinner, they hardly talked about work. Rebecca began questioning Todd about his life, how he chose his profession. He simply melted. He hadn't had many opportunities to talk about himself. Holly was almost uninterested in his work. The first dinner turned into the second, and then the pair went to lunch together. Rumors started circulating around their office. Still, Todd paid no attention to them. Gradually, Todd even forgot how it all began. He began to believe that he and Rebecca were serious, and he felt like he had grown 10 years younger. Holly, in her apron, seemingly glued to the kitchen stove, irritated him more and more, and Rebecca added fuel to the fire. How long can this go on? She asked, pouting. We make such a good couple, complement each other perfectly, and you're clinging to some dead weight. Darling, I don't understand you at all. Do you pity her or what? A little. We spent so many years together. What will happen to her if I leave her? Holly is entirely unaccustomed to life. I don't know what will happen to her, Rebecca replied. But I can tell you for sure what will happen to me if you don't leave her. I'll leave you, Todd. Definitely. From the company too. Because I won't be able to come here every day and look at you. It's beyond my strength. In the end, endless persuasion worked. Todd gave in. Fine, he muttered. I'll talk to Holly and explain to her that we can't live together anymore. I'll go with you, Rebecca interjected. I suspect that if you go alone, you won't be able to talk to your wife frankly. You're so soft, Todd, always feeling sorry for everyone. And as if to confirm her words, he couldn't refuse the girl. Holly was utterly crushed by this conversation. She had long suspected that something was wrong in her relationship with her husband, but she couldn't even imagine that things were so bad. And it had to happen precisely when Erin came to their town. Holly didn't know whether to be happy about the coincidence or not. On the one hand, she felt terribly ashamed in front of her sister. On the other hand, Holly knew where to go. She deliberately sat in the back seat of the taxi, hoping to hide from the driver's gaze. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and the same word echoed in her ears. Poor, poor, poor. Sometimes Holly felt like the taxi driver was looking at her in the rearview mirror, but she didn't care anymore. What difference did it make who thought what about her when her life was over? Erin opened the door almost as soon as she called. The sisters rushed into each other's arms. What's wrong? Erin whispered, stroking Holly's head. You didn't explain everything clearly during the phone call. Something with Todd, right? What did that scoundrel do? He introduced me to his lover. Holly mumbled. What? Erin pushed her sister away and stared at her face in disbelief. Are you joking? How is that possible? Usually, Holly murmured. He brought in some Rebecca, younger and fresher than me. Said he was going to marry her. Found a replacement for me. And this girl just stood there, smirking right in my face. You know, I felt like she was the owner of their apartment. and I was the intruder. Erin continued to shake her head, repeating the same thing. He's a scoundrel. My God, what a scoundrel your husband is. Holly looked around for her little nephew. Is Billy still awake? I don't want to scare him with my tear-stained face. He's watching cartoons. Erin replied. Rest assured, he won't notice anything around him, let alone your face. The women went into the kitchen, and Erin put the kettle on. She didn't interrupt her sister, allowing her to express herself, listening silently without interruption. Holly continued to cry until her tears dried up. She recalled various incidents that had seemed insignificant before but now loomed as massive grievances. He didn't even give me flowers, Holly said. And in general, I've long forgotten how they smell. Now I understand why. Probably spent all the money on this Rebecca. She doesn't look offended. Todd probably didn't forget about her. Among other strange incidents, Holly remembered her own wedding. How interesting. She mumbled. Everything went wrong from the start, as if it was some kind of sign. Do you remember you ran away from our wedding banquet, left to fix your makeup, and returned not quite yourself? Can you tell me what happened then? Erin looked at her with doubt and sighed. So, you still remember this? I guess now we can say nothing worse will happen. That evening, I was upset not because of Mom. I was upset because of your husband. Because of Todd? Holly asked incredulously. Lord, did he manage to do something even then? He didn't, but I think he was planning to. Erin replied. I caught him with some blonde in a secluded corner near the cloakroom. They were chatting so nicely. Todd whispered something in her ear, and as soon as he noticed me, he ran away. Holly stared at her sister in shock. Why didn't you tell me anything back then at the banquet? I didn't want to ruin your personal life. Erin guiltily replied. Hoped that this incident would be a lesson for Todd, that your husband would understand. Thought he'd come to his senses. How foolish. Holly muttered. It would have been better if it all ended then, on the wedding day. Forgive me, Erin said. I was your older sister, but behaved worse than a baby. Nurtured some naive hopes. Believed in people. I'm not any better. Holly sighed. Believed in some charlatan. I should have thought about it back in the village. Todd easily dumped his ex-girlfriend, Alice. I could have guessed that a person who easily breaks up with others will do it again and again, sooner or later, but I was destined to be next. So, are we at peace? Erin asked. Both of us messed up and now need to figure out what to do next. Peace, nodded Holly. I just don't have any special ideas about it. First and foremost, I need to find a job, and we'll see from there. But who would hire me without experience? I spent so many years at home, and during that time, all the laws have changed. Besides, what kind of lawyer can I turn into? I'll have to start learning everything from scratch. You'll learn, Erin confidently stated. Haven't you always been the best? In school and college? When was that? Holly sadly smiled. Back then, I was young, and my mind worked better. People change with years, sister, except for you. Erin insisted. Mark my words, you'll find the best place in town. I believe in you. Holly wished she could get even a drop of Erin's confidence. After the conversation with Todd, she was feeling very pessimistic. Her husband considered her a failure, and most likely, he was right. So, why should things go well for her now? So far, everything in life seemed to be against her. Holly stayed with her sister, taking a few days to recover, strolling around the city, spending time with her nephew, and visiting their mother together. Madison, upon learning about their impending divorce, threw a tantrum and immediately blamed her daughter. You must have done something wrong, she said. A man doesn't just look elsewhere for no reason. Erin, as always, took her sister's side. As far as I remember, Mom, Dad also left us at some point, she said. So, before blaming Holly, think about your own experience. Do you think you were at fault in your divorce? Madison looked angrily at her daughter, but chose not to argue. She only muttered, "I just wanted what was best. We need to find common ground with our husbands, and everything will work out. Nothing needs to be searched for." "Mom," Holly replied, "it's too late. I've already filed for divorce, and it's final." She didn't regret her decision. Often, at night, Holly recalled the rare happy moments from their family life. How excited Todd was when he found out she was pregnant. How they enjoyed vacations by the sea. However, the bad in their relationship outweighed the good in recent years. Holly had no desire to return to how they lived in the last few years. She immersed herself in the search for a job. Holly marked places where she would like to work, even sent resumes, but received no response from any of them. So, she chose simpler places, and she was even invited for interviews. However, upon hearing that the woman hadn't worked for many years, they promised to call her back and disappeared without a trace. Holly was losing her spirit, and her sister's vacation was coming to an end. "Tomorrow, Billy and I are flying," Erin said sadly one evening. "I don't want to leave you alone here, especially in this state." Holly smiled. "I'll be fine. I'll manage. I paid the rent for the apartment for 3 months in advance," Erin said. "You can stay here for now, and I ask you not to argue. If your conscience bothers you, you can repay me when you get a job. But actually, you don't have to pay me back. After all, we're sisters to help each other." Holly gratefully nodded. "Thank you, Erin. You always come to my rescue. I don't know what I would do without you." "And I without you," Erin replied. "At least not alone. I definitely couldn't handle our mother." The sisters hugged but didn't cry. There had been plenty of tears shed recently. Holly was left alone in the morning. It felt like the whole world was against her. She went for another job interview, but as usual, it ended with nothing. Returning home, she visited the shopping center. She didn't have much money, and it seemed like there was nothing to buy. Erin had provided her with supplies for the next week, but Holly really wanted to distract herself. Just to wander around the store, look at the goods, and imagine that she was just like everyone else, not some outcast. It was here that the most important meeting of her life took place. Fateful, one might say. Holly walked through the store, looking at the displays with interest, and was about to leave when her gaze fell on the shelf with cosmetics. More precisely, on the lipstick lying there. For some reason, maternal reproaches surfaced in her memory. Madison believed that her daughter was to blame for her husband's infidelity. So, maybe she was right. Holly saw her reflection in the mirror and grimaced. Perhaps, if she were in Todd's or any other man's place, she wouldn't want to date such a pale person. What is this reflection? I just want to cry. Unconsciously, Holly took a tube of lipstick from the shelf. She realized that it was a silly and unnecessary expense, but she couldn't help herself. Bright colors lured her, attracted her like a magnet. Holly couldn't resist their obsession. Still in a dazed state, she headed to the cashier, and there, real battles were unfolding. As Holly understood, one of the customers, an elderly woman in her 70s, couldn't find her wallet in her bag, and it infuriated the cashier. "Please, don't hold up the line," she said. "People are waiting for you, and I need to work." Some in the crowd supported her with agreeing exclamations. Holly looked towards the cash register. The elderly woman looked like some retired teacher. Neat light blouse, burgundy skirt, straw hat on gray curls. Holly rarely saw such people in real life, more often on TV or in pictures. The stranger looked very lost, overturning her purse, but found nothing. Holly slowly placed the lipstick on the shelf next to the chocolate bars and began to push her way to the front of the line. Now she had a new goal. "Just wait a second. It will definitely turn up," the old lady muttered, rummaging through her bag. "I couldn't have left my wallet at home. This has never happened before." Someone in the crowd whispered something sarcastic about her age. Holly looked at the rude person with a disapproving gaze. The elderly woman was already very close. When Holly reached the cashier, The saleswoman looked at her in surprise. "I'll pay." "Tell me how much," Holly said. She hesitated at her own decision, realizing that she might be spending her possibly last money on someone else's purchase. But she couldn't help it. It was impossible to pass by such injustice. The old woman waved her hands. "No, no, you don't need to pay for me. My wallet will surely be found. And if not, I'll come back to the store another time." However, Holly was determined to see this through. She couldn't calmly watch this scene unfolding before her eyes. "But I'll still pay," she repeated. How much? The amount the old lady had shopped for turned out to be significant. Holly even doubted if she had enough money. Yet, luck was on her side. Counting her last bills and collecting the change, Holly nodded to the stranger. "And now let's gather your purchases and leave. Do you have a bag?" The elderly woman watched her with surprise, apparently not expecting salvation to come from somewhere unknown. Holly noticed that the stranger's face turned red, and she grabbed her elbow. "What's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell?" Nothing. Everything's fine," the old woman replied. "I think my blood pressure went up. It will pass soon." Holly remembered her grandmother, Lauren. She still lived with her mother and often felt unwell, but always, in moments of illness, behaved just like this, convincing others of her health. "Where do you live?" Holly asked. "I'll accompany you." The elderly woman waved her hands. No, I can manage on my own. My house is very close." "With those bags?" Holly asked. "No, don't even argue. I don't want you to fall somewhere on the way. Let's go together." She took the bags from the old lady and walked beside her. The elderly woman was waving her handkerchief and repeatedly saying, "I can't understand how this could happen. Thank you, my dear. Thank you so much." "Don't worry so much. Nothing terrible happened." Holly smiled. "Anyone can experience something like this. Today I helped you. Tomorrow someone will help me. You're a real angel." The woman said, "I'll repay you. Don't doubt that. And I'll definitely treat you to tea with a pie. You look so thin." "No offense, my dear. Being thin might be in fashion now. But you look like you've been starving. You shouldn't be on diets for so long. It's harmful to your health." Holly smiled sadly, thinking that the elderly woman had almost guessed it. For the past few days, she had felt sick from sorrow. Holly had no appetite. Upon seeing the house to which the old woman led her, Holly stopped. "So, you live here?" she asked in amazement. The elderly woman looked at her in confusion. "Yes, right here." "What's the matter?" Holly shook her head. "Nothing. It's a very beautiful house. I haven't been in these parts before, and I regret seeing it for the first time." In fact, her surprise was caused by something else. The house they approached was considered elite in the city. Apartments in this area cost a fortune, and ordinary people didn't live here. Holly couldn't even imagine that her chance acquaintance would turn out to be someone important. They entered the entrance and took the elevator to the top floor. Holly carried the bags to the kitchen and stood by the window. The panoramic view from such a height was breathtaking. "How beautiful," Holly whispered. "Isn't it?" Lydia proudly asked. "I love it too. I never tire of admiring this view. By the way, my name is Lydia." "Holly," she replied, unable to tear her gaze away from the window. The apartment owner started setting the table, and Holly looked around. Children's drawings hung on the walls, and on one of the shelves was a family photo. "Is this your grandson?" Holly asked, pointing to a red-haired, freckled boy about 10 years old. "He's adorable," Lydia sighed. "Yes, he's adorable. But Lyle's temperament is just a nightmare." Holly didn't inquire further to avoid seeming too curious. Instead, Lydia initiated the conversation. "Will you tell me a bit about yourself?" she asked. "I want to know more about my savior." Holly shrugged shyly. "I don't even know what to tell. Where do I start?" "Start with the simplest," Lydia suggested. "For example, the ring on your finger. Are you married? Holly flinched and looked at her hand. She wore the ring out of habit, but she couldn't just spill the details to a stranger. On the other hand, why not? I'm getting divorced soon, Holly replied. Why? Lydia asked. Did that scoundrel find someone else? He found a replacement for me. It's quite a long story. But if you really want to hear it, only if you want to tell me everything, Lydia replied. Holly didn't realize how she had told her everything, the story of meeting Todd, their sad life in recent years, and how it all ended. Lydia hardly interrupted her, only murmuring occasionally, "What a scoundrel! How awful!" With these words, the elderly woman strongly resembled Erin, Holly's sister, evoking sympathy from Holly. Engaged in conversation with Lydia, she didn't hear someone enter the apartment. Well, a disgruntled voice sounded behind her. Every time I leave the house, these scammers show up here. I've asked the concierge so many times to watch visitors closely, but no results. Holly turned around in surprise. The man standing in the kitchen was vaguely familiar to her, and she immediately understood why. He was depicted in Lydia's family photo, standing between the woman and her grandson, just as red-haired as the boy and resembling Lydia. He was her son. Why did you come here? The man continued. Do you want to deceive my mother again? And how can you have the conscience to pull money from pensioners? This is beyond good and evil. Holly looked at him, and her inner indignation grew stronger. It seems like no one taught you manners, she exclaimed. I can't believe that such a worthy woman could raise such a son. Holly got up from her chair and nodded to the apartment owner. Thank you for your hospitality. I'll go now. I wish you all the best. Goodbye. She didn't even look at Lydia's son, left the apartment, and slammed the door loudly. Who is this? He asked, looking at his mother. And what were they trying to sell you this time? A robot vacuum or a set of dishes? Lydia shook her head. It seems like Holly was right. Hugh, you're not just ignorant, but also foolish. I can't believe you managed to become a manager. What did I do wrong? The man asked irritably. I just kicked another scammer out the door. Why did you even think she was a scammer? The old lady asked. Holly was my guest. She helped me in the store, paid for my purchases when I forgot my wallet at home. Then she helped carry the heavy bags to my house, and you yelled at her. Hugh looked at his mother, then sighed. Sorry, Mom. It really came out wrong. It's just been a stressful day. Calls, meetings, and then this person. I thought she was just another scammer and let out all my anger on her. Why are you apologizing to me? Lydia mumbled. You offended Holly. Apologize to her, not me. How will I find her? Hugh wondered. You saw her running away. Probably a block away from here. Not a block, Lydia replied. I found out where she lives. A house on the corner of Lane Street. There's also a hair salon on the ground floor. Go and apologize. Oh, and by the way, there's something I need to tell you about this girl. You need to hear it. Meanwhile, Holly kept running further, unaware that the conversation was about her. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. Inside, she was burning with indignation. This brute, this red-haired bully, called her a scammer. Who did he think he was? After sitting for a while in the park, trying to compose herself, she slowly headed home. There, they were already waiting for her. She saw the familiar red hair from a distance and prepared for a confrontation. Did you forget to tell me something else? She asked as she approached. I regret to inform you that our conversation is over, and I can say that meeting Lydia was more pleasant than meeting you. The man shook his head. No, I wanted to apologize. My mother explained everything, and I realized my mistake. Better late than never. Holly grumbled discontentedly. Understand, my mother is so trusting, Hugh said. She constantly attracts all sorts of scammers. Once, she spent a huge sum on a ridiculous dinner set, and another time on a miracle waffle iron. I have no idea what's gotten into her, She's been so sensible all her life. Only in recent years something happened. I thought you were also selling something to her. Well, things happen, Holly replied. Apologies accepted. Your conscience can rest now. And now excuse me. I need to go. She wanted to bypass the man, but he stopped her. Money, Hugh said, offering bills. My mother said she owed you. Please take it. There's more here than needed, Holly remarked. Still, take it, insisted the man. Consider it compensation for the moral damage. After some thought, Holly decided that Lydia's son was right. She wasn't in a position to refuse the money. All right, thank you, Holly said and tried to continue her way. But Hugh detained her again. My mother said you have some problems, Hugh continued. She said you were looking for a job. Holly blushed, imagining what else Lydia might have told him, and spoke more bluntly than intended. Yes, I'm looking. What's it to you? Can you offer me a job? She didn't expect a positive response, but Hugh didn't meet her expectations. Maybe, he said. Now I'll dictate the address to you. Come tomorrow morning. Let's see what can be done. The man got into his car, as expensive and pompous as the house he lived in, and drove away. Holly remained in complete bewilderment, watching him go. She had no idea how to interpret this offer and what to do with the piece of paper she clenched in her hand. Should she throw it away or keep it? Should she visit this man's business or not? Holly pondered these questions all evening and ultimately decided to take the risk. At least another attempt won't hurt, she thought. In the morning, Holly got up, dressed especially well, and set out. She regretted once again that she had no lipstick, and her mascara was running out. However, she decided that it was even better this way. Let them assess her as a professional. She was in this mood throughout their entire journey to the company, and in front of the entrance, she unexpectedly became scared. Not even their anger at Hugh, which Holly repeatedly tried to invoke within herself, helped. It just evaporated somewhere. Holly felt her knees trembling, much like a student. She managed to reach the HR department and knocked on the door. May I? She asked. The elderly woman sitting behind the desk looked at her sternly. What's the matter? I was invited by Hugh, Holly replied. The woman gave Holly a disapproving look and picked up the phone. Hugh, someone came to you. A girl says you invited her. I'll be right there, he replied. The boss will be here soon, she said, continuing to look at the visitor suspiciously, as if thinking that Holly came to steal something from them. Hugh came in a minute, greeted Holly with a handshake, and said, addressing the woman behind the desk, Meet Isabella. This is your new employee, Holly. We were looking for a replacement for our Anna. She went on maternity leave. Holly and Isabella looked at him with equal amazement. Then Isabella asked, Hugh, who is this girl? Do you know her? Has she worked in the HR department before? I just met her yesterday, the man said. And as for experience, he looked questioningly at Holly, who mumbled, I worked as a lawyer for several years, but it was a long time ago. I have a significant gap in my work history. She'll manage, Hugh said, nodding to Isabella. I believe in her. Perhaps these were simple words, an attempt to apologize for his recent rudeness. However, Holly took them to heart. She was determined to prove that she still had something to offer. She was hired on a probationary period, and she was grateful even for that. Working at first was challenging. Holly struggled to recall long-forgotten knowledge and learn their HR profession. But things were gradually falling into place, and Isabella also soon got used to her. At first, I thought you were some relative of Hugh, she said. You know how other bosses like to place their people everywhere. Thought our director had reached that level. Although, truth be told, I never noticed such tendencies in him before. Holly recalled their first meeting and asked, Hugh can be quite stern, right? What are you talking about? Isabella said in surprise. He can get upset, of course, but he never raised his voice at me. He's a good person and very fair. Such a positive review from Isabella surprised Holly, and she decided to take a closer look at Hugh. She wanted to know to whom she owed her salvation. At first, observation yielded very little results. Hugh spent whole days in his office, attending meetings and handling company matters. Holly could learn very little about him as a person, but one day, everything changed. On a freezing winter day, she encountered a red-haired boy, a spitting image of Hugh but much smaller. He was walking somewhere, looking around, resembling a spy who had infiltrated enemy territory. Lyle. Holly asked in surprise. That name miraculously stayed in her memory. He stopped and looked at her cautiously. Yes. How do you know my name? I'm a friend of your grandmother. What are you doing here? She asked, hiding from Dad. Lyle replied, just don't tell him you saw me here. He'll scold me for running away. Somewhere in the distance, Hugh's voice could be heard. He seemed angry. Holly, not knowing why she was doing this, led the boy into the women's restroom and closed the door. They stood there, listening to Hugh passing by, grumbling, Lyle, you scoundrel. Just wait until I catch you. See, he's upset. Lyle whispered to Holly. Don't give me away to him. Why are you here at all? Don't you need to be in school? School is closed today. There's some urgent repair going on, and Dad took me to work. He said if I stay with Grandma, I'll give her a heart attack. Why are you running through the corridors? Holly asked. Because Dad gave me colored pencils and a sheet of paper, like I'm 5. Told me to sit quietly and draw. I'm not an artist to spend the whole day with colored pencils. I'll wait. I understand you. Will you help me sort out the closet? And I won't give you away to your dad. How does that sound? The boy looked at her and sighed. Okay. It's better than coloring kittens. Isabella wasn't surprised to see Lyle at the door of her office. Probably, the boy had been to the company more than once. Holly explained to him which items to discard and which to keep, and the boy got to work. Initially uncertain and grumbling, he gradually got more involved in the task. There goes this paper, and this one goes aside, he grumbled, compacting the trash bin. Holly, can you believe my dad? He treats me like a 5-year-old. Well, now I'll help you here. This is more fun than coloring. Holly watched him for a while, then left their office and went to the director. May I? She asked. He was sitting at his desk and was noticeably in a bad mood. Of course, the search for Lyle was unsuccessful. Holly, what is it? Hugh asked. I know where your son is, she replied. I met him in the corridor and brought him to my office. Right now, he's helping me organize the archive. Lyle said he got tired of coloring pictures, so he ran away. So, you hired him? The man sighed. Now I have to pay him a salary too. Well, thank you for telling me about this. I won't expose you, but I'll scold him later. No need. Please. You have a wonderful son. He's just going through a transitional age. And honestly, I think you're being unfair to him. Any child would be bored here. Hugh chuckled. Here's the deal. It's boring here. Why don't you come to the New Year's corporate party with everyone? It'll be fun, Hugh suggested. Holly shrugged. I don't know what to tell you. I haven't been working here for long, and I feel awkward going there. Plus, I don't like noisy events. What if I tell you that Lyle is going to? Hugh asked. Will you go with this gentleman, Lyle? Holly exclaimed. To a restaurant. Hugh, but he's little. Can you do that? I don't know what you've imagined, but all our events are decent, Hugh said. No one gets drunk or starts undressing. Besides, I have no one else to leave him with. Mom, of all times, is going on vacation. So, are you going? Will you be a nanny for my son? Hugh himself didn't know where this desire to take the newcomer along came from, but she unexpectedly agreed. I'll go, Holly replied. I need to make sure everything is okay with Lyle. That's how it happened that Holly found herself at the corporate party she had been afraid of. Lyle didn't look very happy, but he brightened up a bit at the sight of Holly. Did they force you to come too? He asked. Holly nodded. Your dad, tyrant, the boy said, causing Holly to laugh. 2 against 1. Ha! Hugh remarked. You two seem to have conspired. Yeah, we did. The woman nodded, inviting the boy. Let's check out what's on the tables. Maybe we'll find something edible. Ignoring Hugh's displeased face, they headed to the banquet hall. In Lyle's company, Holly relaxed and stopped paying attention to the surroundings. They tried some candies, pastries, and Holly had a sandwich with caviar. The chief accountant started waltzing, and many began to slowly dance around the hall. Boring, commented Lyle. Maybe you'll teach me how to do it, Holly asked. Lyle looked at her. You won't be able to, old. Huh? Holly pretended to be offended. But let's try anyway. Wanna bet I can? They moved to a corner of the hall, and Lyle began to show Holly some moves. She burst into laughter, mimicking him. This pair completely forgot where they were and who was watching them, and Hugh watched them, as did the party's host. To Holly's surprise, at the end of the evening, they were awarded the first prize as the best couple in the hall. The boy returned home in high spirits. Hugh hadn't seen his son like that in a long time. After observing him in the rearview mirror, the man asked, Do you have a new girlfriend now? Hugh expected Lyle to get offended or upset, but he just nodded. Holly is cool. Take a closer look at her. Dad, what do you mean? Hugh asked. In this way, Lyle replied. Let her live with us. You and Grandma are so dull. We really need someone normal in the house. Ah, just like you, the father responded. You danced so much that their entire accounting forgot about the drinks. Staring at you, Lyle stuck out his tongue. They were just jealous. Their conversation ended there, but memories of it continued to haunt Hugh. He could no longer look at his new employee in the same way as before. In a sense, Holly had set a record. For many years, Hugh hadn't paid attention to women, considering them something like a nuisance constantly in close proximity. The fault lay with his ex-wife, Ella. When Hugh was not yet a boss but a promising deputy, she was chatting online with some foreigner, rumored to be a millionaire. One fine day, she left her husband and son without a note. Rumor had it that she had already given birth to 2 children for the foreigner, but Hugh didn't want to know. He had his mother, son, and work, and that's where his interest focused. There was no place for women in his world. And now, for the first time, doubt crept into Hugh's soul. In Todd's life, Holly's ex-husband, everything was easy and simple. His new passion, Rebecca, also a colleague, was different from his wife. She didn't demand anything, didn't stand in the kitchen with an apron. For them, it wasn't life, but an endless honeymoon. The couple didn't even bother to get married. Why complicate things? Todd seemed to have found his ideal. There was only one thing he didn't like. Working in the same department, Rebecca brought work issues home. She could start discussing contracts over dinner or complain about the boss, when Todd wanted to forget about everything. "Our Mr. Cruz is just some old fool," the girl would say while cutting the cake, living as if in the past century. "He doesn't want to embrace innovation at all. Darling, let's not talk about work on my birthday, at least," Todd would request. "I'm already sick of hearing about Mr. Cruz. There's enough of that at work." "As you wish. As you wish," Rebecca would say. "I just think you would look much better in his place. Our director is like a relic from the past, as ridiculous and useless as the paper archives in his office." Todd listened to the girl, got irritated, and poured himself some brandy, even though there was no real reason for him to be angry. Rebecca was right in many ways, actually, in every way. The boss's chair should have long belonged to him. Todd, that old fool probably plans to keep going to work until he's 100, he muttered with a slurring tone. and he drags his old accountant wife along. Married an old gossip, and they've taken over the whole enterprise. It's just ridiculous. Rebecca listened and nodded. So understanding, so sincere. Not like his ex-wife, who constantly gave foolish advice. The next morning, Todd woke up with a headache. He remembered little about the previous evening, and he didn't feel like going to work. Todd reluctantly got ready and went to the office, where he immediately criticized his colleague, Nicholas. Hired old folks, Todd grumbled, concluding his speech. Rebecca, smiling, came into their office and announced, "Dear Mr. Cruz wants to see you. Let's go quickly. I'll be back. We'll talk later." Todd told his employees, "Lazy bones are working here." He had no doubt that the boss called him in to praise him for exceeding the plan. But the conversation took a completely different turn. "Write a letter of resignation of your own accord," the director said right from the doorstep. Todd looked at him with surprise. "I don't understand, Mr. Cruz. Is this some kind of joke?" "You're always joking, and I'm always serious," the boss replied. "Tired of working with old folks? Go somewhere else, where there's a lot of young people." "The smartass has been found." Todd looked at the director in confusion, then shifted his gaze to Rebecca. She continued to smile. He suddenly recalled the words he heard from her during their interview. "I was born to win." The girl confirmed her statement, displacing him from his position. There was no doubt about who would take the position of the department head. "Sorry, Todd, but you were inappropriate," Rebecca said. "Can one speak so disrespectfully about the management? What about corporate spirit, ethics?" Todd picked up a sheet of paper from the table. He couldn't get used to his unemployed status. To work, achieve, and lose everything in a minute. How funny. For many months after that, Todd bounced from one place to another. He got a job at one company, but didn't like the salary. They paid him meager wages compared to his previous position. In another place, he had to run errands like a boy. Fetch this, carry that. After a couple of years of this wandering, a position opened up at a large enterprise. Todd flew there on wings, feeling the fighting spirit again, confident that luck was on his side. But a blow awaited him in the HR department. Sitting in the boss's chair was his ex-wife, Holly, almost unrecognizable with her strict makeup and bright blouse, but just as timid as before. "You," she exclaimed in surprise. Todd looked at her, and what astonished him was not the meeting itself, but the fact that his poor, unsuccessful ex-wife became the department head. "How did this happen? How are you here?" Todd awkwardly asked. "And there's a sign with your name on the door." "I don't understand. Isabella retired a couple of months ago," explained Holly. "She was the former head of the HR department. Now I've taken over for her. And how did you end up here? Got tired of your old job?" "Something like that," Todd replied. "I've grown to love variety in recent years. Been to a bunch of places." They fell silent for a moment. And then Holly asked, "And what position do you want?" "As far as I remember, we don't have a manager's position available. We need a simple sales specialist." "Are you really?" "Yes, I'm applying for that position," Todd said. "I told you, I felt like trying something new. I'm planning to start over." Holly nodded. "All right. I think we can take you in. I'll get in touch with the head of the sales department and ask him to consider hiring you. I think you two will get along. He, like you, can't live without initiatives and innovations." Todd did manage to pass the interview and secure the position. On his way home, he remembered the face of his ex-wife, the way she looked at him. "Holly is still crazy about me," he thought. "She's not that bad, after all. What if we try to start over?" A friend with whom he shared his thoughts fully supported Todd. "Of course, give it another shot," he said. "I remember your wife. A real homemaker. Does all the cleaning, ironing. Won't say a word against you. Rebecca was good in her own way, but domestic life was not her thing. Bring back Holly." What are you losing? And really, nothing, thought Todd. Just bringing back the mistress of my empty nest. We'll play a little, and that'll be it. Holly will forgive me for sure. She's not the kind to hold a grudge for years. In one of his early days at work, during his lunch break, Todd went to the HR department, intending to talk to his wife and invite her to a cafe. During their marriage, he rarely treated his wife to such outings. Holly was sure to melt this time. However, everything didn't go as planned. Todd met Holly as she was leaving the HR department, and she seemed to be in a hurry somewhere. She didn't notice him right away, something unusual for her in the past. Todd called out to her, "Hey, where are you rushing off to? You don't even notice me. Don't want to say hello?" Kind of hurtful. He expected Holly to be embarrassed as before, making up silly excuses, but she just nodded. "Hello. I'm sorry. I'm in a hurry. Are you here for work matters? Let's talk after lunch." "It's not the right time now. I'm here for personal matters." Todd objected. Now he had achieved what he wanted. Holly finally seemed flustered. "Personal matters?" she asked again. "I don't understand, Todd. What personal matters could we have?" "Nothing yet, but they could arise. How about having lunch together? There's a good cafe around the corner. I checked it out yesterday. The food is fantastic." Holly hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully, then replied, "Sorry, Todd. I have someone to have lunch with." She tightened her grip on her bag and walked away. Where is she going? Todd wondered. "In a hurry to meet a friend. Her husband is waiting." A female voice behind him answered. "They go out for lunch together every day. Never broke the tradition." Todd looked back and saw a girl he had seen in the HR department. She seemed to have just graduated from college. The girl nodded friendly and pointed to the window. "See for yourself." Todd looked out at the street just in time to see Holly meeting a well-dressed, red-haired man who kissed her on the cheek. Engaged in lively conversation, the couple headed towards a car. "That's our director, Hugh," the girl said. "Didn't you know? They're husband and wife." Todd, almost speechless, nodded. His tongue wouldn't obey him. "Do you need something from HR?" the girl asked. "You're 5 minutes late. Now you'll have to wait. Lunch has just started." Todd hardly listened to her, watching the departing car. Only one phrase spun in his head. "Late. Not by 5 minutes.